Nero Wolfe and the Obsidian Society. It was a Wednesday, one of those raw November nights when Manhattan smells like wet stone and diesel fumes, and the wind comes off the Hudson carrying the promise of winter. I was upstairs in my bedroom at the brownstone on West 35th Street, halfway through a paperback about a private eye who seemed to get punched in the face more often than I cared for professional solidarity, when I heard the Dobermans. Not barking. That would have been almost comforting. This was something else. A low, synchronized rumble that started in the front hall and rippled through the house like a warning tremor before an earthquake. Caesar, Mars, Apollo, Minerva and Diana, all five of them sensing something wrong in unison. When 50+ pounds of disciplined muscle start vibrating with alert tension, you pay attention. I set down the book and checked my watch. 11:47. Nero Wolfe would be in the plant rooms for another 13 minutes, communing with his cattleyas and pretending the world below didn't exist. Fritz Brenner, our chef and the brownstone's beating heart, would already be in bed. That left me to investigate whatever had triggered the dog's internal alarm systems. I pulled on my shoulder holster, the Dixiote settling into its familiar weight against my ribs, and headed downstairs. The 5 Dobermans were arranged in the front hall like pieces on a chessboard. Caesar, the alpha, stood directly before the door, his massive frame still as carved marble. Mars flanked him to the left, all coiled muscle and tactical readiness. Apollo paced near the window, his sharp eyes tracking something in the street. Minerva sat on the bottom stair, her intelligent gaze fixed on me with what I could only describe as concern. Diana, the smallest and quickest, moved between them all like quicksilver, her ears pricked forward. "Easy," I said quietly, reaching down to rest a hand on Caesar's head. His fur was slightly raised. "What have we got?" The answer came in the form of 3 measured knocks, not the kind of knocking you get from a drunk looking for the wrong address, but deliberate, almost ceremonial. Knock, pause, knock, pause, knock. I checked the newly installed peephole, one of several security upgrades after an incident last spring involving a Russian attaché and some unpleasantness with a hand grenade. The fisheye lens showed me a figure in an expensive charcoal overcoat, hands visible and empty, face obscured by the brim of a Homburg hat. Behind him, double parked on the street, a black Cadillac idled with its headlights off. The dogs hadn't moved. They were waiting for my decision. I opened the door to the length of the chain, another recent addition, and kept my hand near the holster. "It's late." The man didn't look up. He simply extended his right hand, which held a cream-colored envelope. In the amber glow of the porch light, I could see it was made of expensive paper, the kind with embedded fibers you can feel with your fingertips. Sealing it was a thick pool of black wax bearing the impression of a symbol I didn't recognize, something circular and ancient-looking, with radiating lines. "For Mr. Nero Wolfe," the courier said. His voice was neutral, cultivated, deliberately forgettable. "From the Obsidian Society." "Never heard of it." "No one has." He kept his hand extended, the envelope perfectly level, as if he could stand there all night holding it. "The matter is urgent, Mr. Goodwin, and private." I hadn't told him my name. That was point 1. Point 2 was that he was still standing on our stoop at midnight, which suggested either extraordinary confidence or extraordinary desperation. Point 3 was that Caesar had shifted his weight forward exactly 1 inch. His way of saying this is wrong, but not immediately dangerous. I took the envelope, through the crack in the door. It was heavier than it looked, and cold to the touch. "Your employer will want to read it tonight," the courier said. He finally raised his head, and I got a glimpse of pale eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, a thin mouth, a face you'd forget 5 minutes after seeing it. "Before the newspapers do." "What newspapers?" But he was already turning away, moving down the steps with the measured tread of someone who'd been trained never to hurry. The Cadillac's rear door opened as if by magic. I couldn't see a driver, and he disappeared inside. The car pulled away from the curb in absolute silence, like a shadow detaching itself from a wall. I closed the door and locked it. The dogs relaxed fractionally, but didn't disperse. They were still waiting. "Yeah," I said to Caesar. "I don't like it either." Upstairs, Wolfe would be finishing his midnight ritual with the orchids, trimming, misting, checking the temperature controls with the precision of a surgeon. He didn't like being disturbed during those sacred hours between 9 and midnight, and he especially didn't like mystery envelopes delivered by men who vanished into phantom automobiles. But the courier had been right about one thing. This felt urgent in a way that couldn't wait until morning. I carried the envelope to the office and set it on Wolfe's desk, where it sat like a small, elegant bomb. The black wax seal caught the light from the desk lamp, and I could see the symbol more clearly now, a circle containing what might have been a star or a flower, surrounded by markings that looked vaguely runic. Whatever the Obsidian Society was, they had money for good stationery and theatrical presentation. The elevator machinery hummed. Wolfe was descending. I sat in my chair and pulled out my notebook, pretending to review the day's correspondence. The Dobermans had followed me into the office and arranged themselves in their usual positions. Caesar near the door, Mars by the safe, Apollo at the window, Minerva beside my desk, Diana curled in the corner where she could see everything. They were still alert but patient now. They trusted Wolfe to handle whatever came next. I wasn't quite so sure. The elevator settled with a soft thunk. Footsteps in the hall, 1/7 of a ton of Nero Wolfe making his way to the office, probably already irritated that a light was on and I was still awake. He appeared in the doorway, his massive frame filling it completely, his dark eyes sweeping the room with the kind of comprehensive glance that missed nothing. He saw the dogs first, then the envelope, then me, Archie. His voice was a bass rumble, somewhere between a cello and distant thunder. "It is after midnight. I know, we had a visitor, very polite, very mysterious, very gone. He left you a present." Wolfe moved to his desk and lowered himself into the custom-reinforced chair that had been built to support his bulk. He didn't touch the envelope. Instead, he looked at it the way a chess master looks at a board position, analyzing angles, searching for traps. "From whom?" "He called them the Obsidian Society. Said you'd want to read it before the newspapers do." "The newspapers?" He pursed his lips in and out, his thinking gesture. "I dislike secret societies, Archie. They breed paranoia and self-importance in equal measure. They are, as a rule, composed of men who mistake exclusivity for excellence. Want me to throw it away?" "Don't be absurd." He reached for the envelope with delicate fingers, surprisingly nimble for their size, and broke the black wax seal with his thumbnail. The symbol cracked, but remained partially intact on the paper, like a wound that wouldn't quite heal. He extracted a single sheet of the same expensive stationery, folded once, and began to read. I watched his face. Wolfe's expression rarely changed, but there were subtle tells if you knew where to look. The slight narrowing of the eyes meant he was intrigued. The barely perceptible tightening of the jaw meant he was annoyed. The way his left eyebrow rose exactly 1/4 of an inch meant he was surprised. All three appeared in succession. When he finished reading, he set the letter down with excessive care and looked past me at nothing in particular, the way he looked when his mind was already 3 moves ahead of everyone else in the room. "Well?" I asked. "It is unsigned. The prose is educated but not pedantic, written by someone who values clarity over flourish. The paper is Crane's Crest, 40-pound weight, watermarked. The wax seal is genuine obsidian dust, mixed with polymer resin, applied while hot. None of these details are accidental." "That's great, but what does it say?" He picked up the letter again and read aloud, his voice stripping away any drama the author might have intended. "Mr. Wolfe, one of our members is dead. The circumstances are impossible. The implications are catastrophic, and the authorities cannot be permitted involvement. We require your discretion, your intellect, and your immediate attention. A car will arrive at 9 o'clock tomorrow evening to bring you to our location. The fee for your services, should you accept, will be $50,000. The cost of your refusal cannot be calculated." He set the letter down again and reached for the beer opener on his desk, a nightly ritual that usually signaled the end of business. But the bottle of beer stayed unopened. "Threats and money," I said. "A classic combination. What's your read?" "My read, as you put it, is that someone died tonight. Someone wealthy, connected, and compromised. The Obsidian Society, whatever it may be, finds itself exposed and requires a buffer between their secrets and the light. They have chosen me for this buffer. And are you flattered?" "I am suspicious." He finally opened the beer, poured it with the precision of a chemist, and drank exactly half. Secret societies do not approach investigators unless their secrets have already failed. Something has broken in their carefully constructed world, and they wish for me to mend it invisibly. "So we're refusing?" We are declining. I do not cater to cabals, Archie, regardless of their medieval pretensions or their bank accounts. I should have left it there. Wolfe had made his decision, and when Nero Wolfe makes a decision, it has the permanence of continental drift. But something about the whole thing nagged at me. The synchronized appearance of the courier, the theatrical seal, the casual mention of $50,000 as if it were pocket change. Most of all, the phrase, "the cost of your refusal cannot be calculated." What if they're right? I asked. What if somebody really is dead, and these people are connected enough to make problems for us? Wolfe set down his beer glass and fixed me with the kind of look that could freeze running water. Archie, I have been threatened by generals, ambassadors, crime lords, and once, memorably, by a member of the Rockefeller family. I am still here. The Obsidian Society, whoever they may be, will adjust to disappointment. $50,000 is a lot of adjusting. It is also a lot of entanglement. Good night, Archie. He picked up the letter, walked to the fireplace, and dropped it onto the dying embers. The expensive paper caught immediately, curling into black ash. The obsidian seal resisted for a moment, then cracked with a sound like a whisper. Wolfe watched it burn completely, before turning back to me. "Tomorrow," he said, "you will inform anyone who inquires that I am engaged in personal matters and unavailable for consultation. You will be polite, professional, and final. Is that clear?" "Crystal." "Good. Now go to bed. The Dobermans are restless, which means you are restless, which means I will be restless if this continues. We all require sleep." He was right about that, at least. Caesar had stood up and moved closer to the window, where Apollo was still pacing. Minerva had her head cocked at an angle that suggested she was listening to something I couldn't hear. Mars remained by the safe, solid as a statue. Diana had disappeared, which meant she was probably already upstairs, checking the plant rooms. I said goodnight and headed for the stairs. Behind me, I heard Wolfe's chair creak as he settled in for another beer and possibly one of his books. The office lights stayed on. The Dobermans followed me up to the second floor, then distributed themselves according to their usual protocol, Caesar at Wolfe's bedroom door, Mars at mine, Apollo and Minerva alternating patrol routes through the halls, Diana somewhere in the shadows, keeping her own mysterious counsel. I lay in bed with my hands behind my head, staring at the ceiling and listening to the brownstone settle into its nighttime sounds, the furnace clicking, the old wood contracting, the faint hum of the elevator machinery, Mars breathing steadily near the door. And somewhere outside, in the fog-wrapped streets of Manhattan, the Obsidian Society was doing whatever secret societies do when their secrets start to kill them. I didn't sleep well that night. Neither, I suspected, did Nero Wolfe. By morning, we'd both discovered that the Obsidian Society hadn't given us a choice at all. They'd simply given us warning. The real invitation was already on its way. I came downstairs at 8:15 Thursday morning to find Fritz in the kitchen, producing miracles with eggs, cream, and what smelled like fresh tarragon. The Dobermans had already been fed and watered. Fritz maintained their schedule with the same precision he applied to Wolfe's breakfast tray, and they greeted me with the casual dignity of nobility, acknowledging a competent servant. "Good morning, Archie," Fritz said without turning from the stove. He had that uncanny ability to know who was in the room just by the sound of their footsteps. "Coffee is ready. Mr. Wolfe will be down at 9 as usual. There are blueberry pancakes if you would like them. Fritz, you're a god among men. I am a cook among ingredients. There is a difference." I poured coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the morning papers, the Times, the Herald Tribune, and the Daily News. Fritz had already marked 3 articles with small pencil checks in the margins, his way of flagging anything that might interest Wolfe or complicate our lives. The first was a 2-paragraph notice on page 12 of the Times, easy to miss if you weren't looking. Financier found dead in private club. Theodore Blackwell, 61, a prominent investment banker and art collector, was discovered deceased late Tuesday evening at an exclusive private establishment on Manhattan's Upper East Side. Police characterized the death as unexplained but not suspicious. Mr. Blackwell was a senior partner at Blackwell & Shaw and served on the boards of 3 major philanthropic foundations. Services are pending. The second article, in the Herald Tribune, was even shorter. Millionaire dies at secret meeting. Theodore Blackwell, whose fortune was estimated at $15 million, died under mysterious circumstances during a gathering of an unnamed society. Sources close to the investigation suggest the death may have been from natural causes, though an autopsy is scheduled. Blackwell was known for his discretion and his connections to several influential New York families. The third, from the Daily News, had a better headline writer. Rich guy croaks at secret club. Cops tight-lipped. I read all 3 articles twice, drinking coffee and feeling that particular tightness in my stomach that comes from recognizing trouble before it fully arrives. Theodore Blackwell. Dead Tuesday night. Private club. Unnamed society. The Obsidian Society's letter had arrived Wednesday midnight, less than 24 hours after the death, which meant either they moved very fast or they'd been planning to contact Wolfe even before Blackwell died. Neither possibility was comforting. Fritz, I said, did we get any phone calls this morning? 3. I took messages. He gestured to the notepad by the kitchen phone. A Mrs. Blackwell calling at 7:30, a Mr. Dent calling at 7:45, and Inspector Kramer calling at 8 o'clock and saying he would arrive at 9:15, whether convenient or not. He actually said that? His exact words were somewhat more colorful. I provided the translation. I checked my watch. That gave me 45 minutes before Kramer showed up to complicate everything. I should have felt relieved. Wolfe had turned down the Obsidian Society, burned their letter, and refused their case. We were out of it, clean, uninvolved, except that 3 people had called before 9 a.m., one of them the widow of the dead man, and Inspector Kramer of Homicide was on his way here with or without an invitation, which meant the death wasn't being written off as natural causes, which meant someone was asking questions, which meant the Obsidian Society's carefully constructed secrecy was already leaking like a sieve. And we were right in the splash zone. Mars nudged my knee with his massive head. His way of saying, "You're thinking too loud, and you stopped petting me 3 minutes ago." I obliged him with a scratch behind the ears while reading the articles one more time, searching for anything I'd missed. "Archie," Fritz was watching me with concern. "Is there trouble?" "Almost certainly. But Wolfe turned down the case, so it's not our trouble." "You believe that?" "I want to believe that. There's a difference." "Yes," Fritz said quietly. "That is what I thought." At precisely 9 o'clock, Nero Wolfe descended from the plant rooms and entered the kitchen. He was wearing a yellow shirt that made him look like a prosperous bumblebee, and a brown tie that had gone out of fashion in 1947. His morning mood was, as usual, tentatively optimistic, a man who had spent an hour with his orchids and believed the day might yet prove tolerable. "Good morning, Archie." "Fritz." He settled into his chair at the small breakfast table. "I trust the night was uneventful." "Depends on your definition," I said, and slid the newspapers across to him. Theodore Blackwell died Tuesday night. The Obsidian Society contacted us Wednesday midnight. Kramer is arriving in 15 minutes. Wolfe's optimism evaporated like morning dew under a blowtorch. He read all 3 articles without comment, his lips pursed in that way that meant his brain was assembling and disassembling scenarios at high speed. When he finished, he set the papers aside and looked at Fritz. "The usual, please. With perhaps extra bacon. I suspect I will need fortification." "Already prepared, sir." Fritz brought the tray: scrambled eggs with herbs, 8 strips of bacon, wheat toast with marmalade, and a full pot of coffee. Wolfe ate in silence, which was never a good sign. When Nero Wolfe stopped talking during a meal, it meant he was using that mental energy elsewhere. I let him finish before trying again. "So here's the situation. Dead millionaire, secret society, cops asking questions, and we're already on the list because somebody knew to call here this morning. The society picked you specifically, which means they did their homework. Kramer showing up means he's already connected us somehow. We're in this whether you like it or not." "We are not." He dabbed his lips with his napkin. "We declined the case. I made that abundantly clear. To the letter you burned, not to the people who sent it. A letter is sufficient communication. I am not obligated to provide redundant clarification." "Wolfe?" The doorbell rang. Caesar's ears came up. All 5 dogs moved into position, not aggressive, but ready. The brownstone had its own rhythms, and unexpected visitors triggered specific protocols. I checked my watch. 9:13. Kramer was early, which meant he was extra annoyed. "I'll get it," I said. "Try not to eat all the bacon before I get back." I went to the front hall with Mars beside me and checked the peephole. Sure enough, Inspector Lionel T. Kramer of Manhattan Homicide was standing on our stoop, chewing on an unlit cigar and looking like a man who'd been up since 5 a.m., dealing with people who wouldn't tell him the truth. He was wearing his work suit, grey, rumpled, indestructible, and the expression of a bulldog with a migraine. I opened the door. "Inspector, you're early." "Yeah, well, people keep dying at inconvenient times. Where's Wolfe?" "Finishing breakfast. You want to wait in the office?" "I want answers, Goodwin. But I'll settle for the office." He came in without waiting for an invitation, glanced at the Dobermans with the wary respect of a man who'd seen what dogs could do when motivated, and headed straight for the office. Mars and Caesar followed him. The others maintained their positions. I got Kramer settled in the red leather chair and offered coffee, which he declined with a grunt. He took the cigar out of his mouth, looked at it with distaste, and put it back. "How long have you known Theodore Blackwell?" he asked. "Never heard of him until 20 minutes ago." "Who was he?" "You're telling me Wolfe isn't working for the Blackwell family?" "I'm telling you I don't know any Blackwells." "Then why did the widow call here at 7:30 this morning?" "That stopped me cold." "You've got her phone tapped?" "I've got her phone records, which is legal and different. She called this number at 7:30. Then someone named Silas Dent called here at 7:45. Then I called at 8. So let's stop playing games, and you tell me what's going on." Before I could answer, Wolfe entered the office, moving with the ponderous grace of an ocean liner navigating a narrow canal. He took his seat behind the desk, adjusted himself for comfort, and regarded Kramer with polite distaste. "Inspector, your visit is unexpected and unwelcome." "Yeah, that makes two of us. Why is a widow calling you 12 hours after I start investigating her husband's murder?" "Murder?" Wolfe's eyebrows climbed half an inch. "The newspapers suggested natural causes." "The newspapers suggest what I tell them to suggest while I'm working a case. Theodore Blackwell was poisoned with aconitine sometime Tuesday night at an exclusive club that won't tell me its name, won't show me its membership list, and won't explain what they were doing in an abandoned building at midnight. 3 different lawyers showed up before I finished processing the scene. That's not natural causes, Wolfe. That's murder with money and lawyers attached." Wolfe was silent for a moment. "Then, what has this to do with me?" "That's what I'm asking you. I have never met Theodore Blackwell. I have never heard of the club you describe. I have no client and no case." "Then why?" "However," Wolfe interrupted, "someone appears to believe that I should become involved. Last night, shortly before midnight, a courier delivered a letter which I declined to accept and subsequently destroyed. The letter was from an organization calling itself the Obsidian Society. They wished to retain my services. I refused." Kramer's expression shifted from annoyed to alert. "Obsidian Society? That's new. Tell me more." "There is nothing more to tell. I declined their offer and burned the letter." "You burned evidence?" "I burned refuse. I had no reason to believe it constituted evidence of anything except misguided presumption." "And the widow called this morning because—" "I have no idea. Perhaps you should ask her." They stared at each other across the desk, 2 immovable objects with conflicting gravitational fields. Caesar sat between them, his dark eyes tracking back and forth like a spectator at a tennis match. Kramer pulled out his notebook. "Tell me exactly what the letter said." Wolfe sighed, a sound like a distant avalanche. "It stated that one of their members was dead, that the circumstances were impossible, and that they required my discretion and immediate attention. They offered $50,000 and implied unpleasant consequences should I refuse." $50,000. Kramer whistled low. "For what, specifically?" The letter was vague on details. It assumed I would accept the fee and the mystery as a package. "And you turned it down?" "Obviously. Why?" Wolfe looked at him as if he'd asked why water was wet. "Because I do not cater to secret societies, Inspector. They are invariably composed of self-important men playing dress-up and calling it tradition. Their secrets are rarely worth keeping, and their problems are typically of their own manufacture. Even for $50,000. My fee has never been the deciding factor in accepting a case. The problem must interest me. This one does not." "Well, it better start interesting you pretty quick, because 3 more people from that club have called my office this morning, demanding that I close the investigation. When rich people start yelling at me in unison, it means they're covering something up. And when they call you the same morning they're calling me, It means you're part of whatever they're covering. An unfortunate misapprehension on their part. Maybe. Or maybe you're playing cute with me, Wolfe, and I don't like being played. Inspector. Wolfe's voice dropped into its dangerous register, the tone that meant his patience was exhausted. I have told you everything I know, which is effectively nothing. The courier delivered a letter. I declined the offer and destroyed the communication. That is the sum total of my involvement. If the Obsidian Society has chosen to harass both of us this morning, that is their difficulty, not mine. And if I subpoena you, to testify to what? That I received junk mail? Please, Inspector, you're better than this. Kramer chewed on his cigar, thinking. Outside, a garbage truck rumbled past. Diana appeared in the doorway, glanced at all of us, decided nothing was immediately dangerous, and disappeared again. All right, Kramer said finally. Here's what I know. Theodore Blackwell was a financier with connections to half the power players in Manhattan. He died in a locked room during some kind of ritual meeting. The poison that killed him is rare, expensive, and nearly impossible to trace. Everyone present claims they saw nothing, heard nothing, and remember nothing useful. The building where it happened is owned by a shell corporation behind a shell corporation behind a trust fund that's been dead for 30 years, and now you're getting phone calls from people connected to the victim. He stood up, jamming the cigar back in his pocket. I don't believe in coincidences, Wolfe. Something's going on here, and you're right in the middle of it, whether you know it or not. So do yourself a favor when they come calling again, and they will, you tell me about it before you do anything stupid. I am never stupid, Inspector. No, you're arrogant, which is worse, because it makes you predictable. He headed for the door, then stopped. One more thing. The widow, Mrs. Blackwell, she's a sculptor, works in rare materials, obsidian, specifically. Thought you'd want to know. He left without waiting for a response. Mars escorted him to the front door with professional courtesy, then returned to the office and settled at my feet with a satisfied huff. Wolfe sat perfectly still, his eyes closed, his fingers laced across his middle stomach. I knew that posture. He was thinking, which was dangerous. When Nero Wolfe thought hard enough, things started happening, whether he wanted them to or not. Archie. Yeah? Arrange for Saul Panzer to be available. Also, bring me the telephone directory for Manhattan, and everything you can find about Theodore Blackwell in the library's archives. I wish to know who this man was before I decide whether his death concerns me. I thought you weren't taking the case. I am not. But I am also not a fool. Kramer is correct. We have been pulled into this matter regardless of my preferences. The least I can do is understand why. And the widow's phone call. Return it, express sympathy, and ask what she wanted. Be polite, be brief, and be gone before she persuades you of anything. You think she'll try? Archie, she called at 7:30 in the morning. That suggests either desperate urgency or calculated manipulation. Neither bodes well. Proceed with caution. I reached for the phone, already knowing this was going to be more complicated than either of us wanted. In the corner, Caesar stood up, stretched, and moved to his position by the door. Even the Dobermans knew trouble had arrived, and it wasn't planning to leave any time soon. Mrs. Theodore Blackwell lived in a converted warehouse in Soho, back when Soho was still a place where artists could afford to live and work without selling a kidney. The building was 5 stories of red brick and iron fire escapes, with windows large enough to drive a truck through, the kind of space that meant either old money or new success, and from what Kramer had said, the Blackwells had both. I'd called ahead. The conversation had been brief and strange. Mrs. Blackwell, this is Archie Goodwin, returning your call from this morning. A pause, then a voice like smoke over whiskey, cultured but rough around the edges, as if she'd spent years training it to be softer than it wanted to be. Mr. Goodwin, I wasn't certain you'd respond. Your husband died. You called. That seems like enough reason. Yes, I suppose it does. Another pause, longer this time. Can you come here? I don't wish to discuss this over the telephone. When? Now, if possible. I'm working, but I can stop. The address is. I've got it. Give me 40 minutes. Mr. Goodwin? Don't bring anyone, and don't tell anyone you're coming. Why not? Because Theodore died keeping secrets, and I'm not ready to die keeping them too. She'd hung up before I could ask what that meant. Now I was standing in front of a freight elevator that looked like it had been installed during the Taft administration, pulling the metal gate closed and hoping the cables were in better shape than the rest of the mechanism. The elevator groaned upward with the enthusiasm of an arthritic grandfather, giving me plenty of time to second-guess this whole enterprise. Wolfe had been right to be cautious. Everything about this situation had the feel of quicksand. The more you struggled, the deeper you sank. But I was also curious, and curiosity was my second worst habit after wisecracking at inappropriate moments. The elevator shuddered to a stop on the 5th floor. I opened the gate and stepped into a space that made me forget how to breathe for a second. The entire floor was one massive studio, lit by the late morning sun pouring through those enormous windows. The light caught thousands of dust motes in the air, turning them into a galaxy of tiny stars. But it wasn't the light that stopped me, it was what the light revealed. Sculptures everywhere, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Some on pedestals, some on the floor, some suspended from the ceiling by invisible wires. Figures in black stone, obsidian I assumed, ranging from 6 inches to 6 feet tall. Human forms mostly, but abstracted and dreamlike. A woman's torso flowing into wings. A man's face fragmenting into geometric shards. 2 figures embracing while simultaneously pulling apart. And in the center of it all, wearing a clay-stained work shirt and canvas pants, stood the widow. Juliet Blackwell was maybe 40, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, and the kind of face that fashion magazines would call striking, because beautiful was too simple a word. She had sculptor's hands, strong, scarred, capable of both creation and destruction. Her eyes were grey and direct, the eyes of someone who'd spent years looking at the world and deciding how to reshape it. Mr. Goodwin. She didn't offer to shake hands. Hers were covered in fine black dust. Thank you for coming. My condolences about your husband. Are they genuine, or is that just what one says? Little of both, probably. I never met him. No. You wouldn't have. Theodore didn't meet people casually. Everything was calculated, measured, controlled. She gestured at the sculptures around us. That's why I work in obsidian. It's volcanic glass, formed in fire and violence, but it fractures with perfect precision. Like Theodore's life, beautiful on the surface, sharp enough to cut when you got too close. That's quite an epitaph. It's an honest one. I loved my husband, Mr. Goodwin, but I'm not going to pretend he was a saint just because he's dead. She walked to a work table covered in tools, chisels, hammers, files, grinding wheels, and began cleaning her hands with a rag. Why didn't Mr. Wolfe come himself? He's not taking your case. I haven't offered him a case. Then why did you call? She finished cleaning her hands and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Because Theodore was murdered by the Obsidian Society, and they're going to try to convince Mr. Wolfe that I did it. I wanted to tell my side before they told theirs. That wasn't what I'd expected. I found a stool that looked sturdy enough and sat down. Start at the beginning. The beginning. She smiled without humor. That would be 11 years ago, when Theodore and I met at a gallery opening in Chelsea. He bought 3 of my pieces before the show even opened. Said he collected art the way other men collected baseball cards, obsessively and without apology. We were married 6 months later. Fast courtship. Theodore didn't waste time on courtship. He made decisions and expected the world to align with them. Usually it did. She picked up a small sculpture from the table, a figure of a man with his hand over his heart. He told me on our wedding night that he belonged to a society. Very old, very exclusive, very secret. He said I would never meet them, never hear their names, and never speak of them to anyone. In exchange, we'd want for nothing: money, connections, protection. All I had to do was pretend they didn't exist. And you agreed. I was 29, Mr. Goodwin. I'd spent 10 years starving for my art. Theodore offered me freedom and a studio, and the ability to work without compromise. So yes, I agreed. I pretended not to see the men who came to our home at odd hours. I pretended not to notice when Theodore disappeared for entire weekends. I pretended not to hear the phone conversations he had in the middle of the night, speaking in languages I didn't recognize. She set the sculpture down with a sharp click. But 18 months ago, they contacted me directly. The society. They wanted a commission. For what? A statue. 7 feet tall. Pure obsidian. They gave me specific dimensions, specific proportions, and a symbolic requirement. It had to represent the burden of knowledge. Those were their exact words. They offered me $100,000. I let out a low whistle. That's a lot of burden. It took me 14 months to complete. Obsidian is difficult to work. It's brittle, it's unpredictable, and a single mistake can shatter weeks of labor. But I finished it, delivered it 3 weeks ago to an address on East 71st Street. An old building, looked abandoned from the outside. They wouldn't let me inside. Just took the statue and gave me a check. And then your husband died. And then my husband died. In that same building, with my statue in the room. Her voice remained steady, but something in her eyes had gone cold. The police haven't told me this, but I know it's true. Theodore loved my work. He would have insisted the statue be present at their meetings, and now it's evidence in a murder investigation, and I'm the artist who created it. You think they're setting you up. I think they're protecting themselves, and I'm expendable. Theodore was many things, but he was also a liability. He'd been talking about leaving the society, about exposing certain activities. He thought they were going too far. She laughed bitterly. Too far, as if there's an acceptable distance for conspiracy. I pulled out my notebook. Tell me about the society, everything you know. I know almost nothing, which was the point, but I've pieced things together over the years. They're wealthy, not just rich but generationally wealthy. They meet monthly, always at midnight, always in that building on East 71st. They have rituals, oaths, hierarchies. Theodore once mentioned something about the inner circle and the outer circle, as if they had layers of membership. How many members? 15, I think, maybe 20. Theodore never gave me names, but he let things slip. He mentioned a banker named Dent, Silas Dent, a professor who dealt in antiquities, a journalist who specialized in exposing corruption, which Theodore found darkly ironic, and others, always men, always connected, always careful. What was their purpose? Power, Mr. Goodwin. What else? They traded information, manipulated markets, influenced elections. Theodore called it enlightened self-interest. I called it a criminal conspiracy with better table manners. And you stayed married to him. I loved him despite his compromises, or maybe because of them. Love isn't rational, Mr. Goodwin. If it were, you'd probably be in a different line of work. She had me there. I stood and walked over to one of the larger sculptures, a figure that seemed to be emerging from or sinking into a pool of black glass. Up close, I could see the incredible precision of the work, every surface polished to a mirror finish. Why call Nero Wolfe? Because he can't be bought, and he can't be intimidated. The society will try both, but I've read about Mr. Wolfe. He doesn't bend. He also doesn't like leaving his house. Then he'll have to make an exception. The society meets tonight, Friday evening. They'll be discussing what to do about Theodore's death, about the police investigation, about exposure. If Mr. Wolfe wants to solve this murder, he'll need to be there. You're assuming he's taking the case. He will, eventually. Men like Mr. Wolfe can't resist a locked room mystery with powerful suspects and a pile of secrets. It's catnip for geniuses. You seem pretty confident. I'm desperate, Mr. Goodwin. Confidence is just what desperation looks like when you're too proud to beg. She walked to a cluttered desk in the corner and retrieved a small envelope. Give this to Mr. Wolfe. It's everything Theodore told me about the society, written down. Names, dates, locations, not much, but it's a start. I took the envelope. It was heavier than expected and sealed with regular wax. No obsidian, no mysterious symbols. One more thing, she said. The statue I made, the one representing the burden of knowledge, it's hollow. Theodore told me that on the night I delivered it, he said it was perfect for their needs, as if they'd planned for it to be hollow all along. I didn't understand what he meant. And now? Now I think they were hiding something inside it, and I think Theodore found out what it was, and I think that's why he's dead. We stood there in the sunlit studio, surrounded by frozen figures of black glass, while outside the city rumbled on without caring who lived or died or kept what secrets. I'll give this to Wolfe, I said finally, but I can't promise he'll do anything with it. He will, because you're curious, Mr. Goodwin, and he trusts your instincts. You'll make him see that this matters. You're pretty good at reading people. I'm a sculptor. I study forms, proportions, the space between what people show and what they hide. You're easier to read than most. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. Whether it's a compliment depends on whether you tell Mr. Wolfe the truth about what you saw here. Which truth? That I'm afraid, that I'm being framed, and that the Obsidian Society is going to kill again if someone doesn't stop them. Her grey eyes held mine. That's the truth that matters, Mr. Goodwin. The rest is just context. I left her there among her sculptures, descended in that death trap elevator, and stepped out into the cold November air, feeling like I'd just interviewed a ghost. Everything about Juliet Blackwell felt rehearsed, as if she'd been preparing for this conversation for weeks. But whether she was telling the truth, or playing an elaborate game, I couldn't tell. The envelope in my pocket felt like it was getting heavier with each step. I caught a cab back to West 35th Street, watching the city slide past the windows, and thinking about secret societies, hollow statues, and widows who knew too much. By the time I got back to the brownstone, I'd made a decision. Wolfe wasn't going to like it. But then, he rarely did. I found Wolfe in the office, reading a book the size of a small refrigerator, something about the taxonomy of Central American orchids, probably, or the philosophical implications of beer fermentation. He glanced up as I entered, noted my expression, and sighed. I perceived that Mrs. Blackwell was persuasive. She was informative. There's a difference. I tossed the envelope onto his desk. Her version of the story. Names, dates, locations. She says her husband was killed because he wanted to expose the society, and that she's being set up as the murderer. Convenient. Also plausible. Archie, everything is plausible until it's examined. Plausibility is the currency of liars and the refuge of the uninformed. He picked up the envelope without opening it. What is your assessment of Mrs. Blackwell's veracity? She's smart, she's scared, and she's hiding something. Whether that something is guilt or just more secrets, I couldn't tell you. Did she strike you as capable of murder? She works with hammers and chisels. She could probably kill someone 6 different ways before breakfast. But capable isn't the same as guilty. No. Though in this case, the distinction may be academic. He finally opened the envelope and extracted several sheets of paper covered in tight, precise handwriting. His eyes moved across the pages with the kind of focused intensity that meant he was reading between the lines as much as the lines themselves. I settled into my chair and watched him work. This was the part where Nero Wolfe became dangerous, not to criminals specifically, but to the ordered world in general. When he started seeing patterns that other people missed, things began to happen. Furniture got rearranged. People got uncomfortable. Truths got exposed, whether anyone wanted them exposed or not. After 10 minutes of silence, he set the pages down and reached for the beer opener. She has given us names, he said. Silas Dent, financier and society treasurer. Professor Malcolm Rees, antiquities expert, specializes in secret societies and occult history. Lyman Kerr, journalist at the Herald Tribune, paradoxically a man who exposes corruption while participating in it. Dr. Helena Cross, physician, presumably present to handle medical emergencies, and 9 others whose names are less certain but whose occupations are revealing: judges, corporate executives, a deputy mayor, a museum curator, a regular who's who of Manhattan's finest. Indeed, Mrs. Blackwell has also provided the address of their meeting place, 314 East 71st Street, a former museum building owned by the Blackwell Family Trust since officially abandoned. Unofficially, maintained as a private club at considerable expense. You planning to crash their party? I am planning nothing of the sort. I am, however, planning to have Saul Panzer observe their gathering this evening and report what he sees, discreetly. Saul's good, but he can't walk through walls. If this place is as locked down as Kramer says, he won't get anywhere near it. Then he will observe from outside and note who enters, who exits, and what security measures are employed. Information, Archie. We gather information before we make decisions. The phone rang. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office. Mr. Goodwin? A man's voice, smooth as expensive scotch and twice as calculated. My name is Silas Dent. I believe Mrs. Blackwell may have mentioned me. I covered the mouthpiece, Dent, the society's treasurer. Wolfe's eyebrows climbed. He gestured for me to continue. She mentioned you, I said into the phone. What can I do for you, Mr. Dent? I'd prefer to discuss that in person. I'm calling from a car approximately 3 blocks from Mr. Wolfe's residence. I'll arrive in 2 minutes. Please inform Mr. Wolfe that I'm coming alone, unarmed, and prepared to offer terms he'll find acceptable. Mr. Wolfe doesn't negotiate terms with 2 minutes, Mr. Goodwin, and please no theatrics. I'm far too old for games. He hung up. Wolfe looked at me with an expression somewhere between annoyance and resignation. The day accelerates beyond my control. Very well. When Mr. Dent arrives, show him in. We shall hear what the Obsidian Society believes constitutes acceptable terms. You want the Dobermans present? Certainly. If Mr. Dent is uncomfortable around intelligent animals, that will tell us something useful about his character. I went to the front hall and waited. Caesar materialized beside me. He had an uncanny sense for when visitors were about to arrive, and together we watched through the side window as a midnight blue Bentley pulled to the curb. The car probably cost more than the brownstone. The rear door opened, and Silas Dent emerged. 65, impeccably tailored, silver-haired, with the kind of face that had spent decades in boardrooms and learned to reveal nothing. He moved like a man who'd never hurried in his life and never needed to. The Bentley pulled away immediately, leaving him standing on our stoop as if he owned it. He rang the bell with one measured press. I opened the door. Caesar sat beside me, perfectly still, his dark eyes assessing the visitor with professional detachment. Mr. Goodwin. Dent's smile was practiced and meaningless. Thank you for receiving me on such short notice. You didn't really give us a choice. No, I suppose I didn't. May I come in? I stepped aside. Dent entered, glanced at Caesar without visible reaction, and allowed me to escort him to the office. Mars and Apollo joined us in the hallway, maintaining a loose perimeter. Dent noticed them but said nothing. Wolfe was standing behind his desk when we entered, his way of establishing dominance without appearing to try. He remained standing until Dent was seated in the red leather chair, then lowered himself into his own chair with deliberate slowness. Mr. Dent, you have 2 minutes to state your business before I conclude this meeting. Dent smiled again, this time with something approaching genuine amusement. Direct. I appreciate that. Very well. The Obsidian Society would like to retain your services to prove that Juliet Blackwell murdered her husband. Silence. Wolfe pursed his lips. I kept my expression neutral. That is an interesting proposition, Wolfe said finally. Why should you believe Mrs. Blackwell is guilty? Because she had motive, opportunity, and means. Theodore was planning to divorce her. His life insurance policy pays double for accidental death, which murder technically qualifies as under the policy's language, and she created the murder weapon. The statue. Ah, she's already spoken to you. Yes, the statue. 7 feet of polished obsidian, hollow in the center, delivered to our meeting house 3 weeks ago. 2 days before Theodore's death, someone placed a time-release capsule of aconitine inside the hollow chamber. The capsule was designed to rupture when the statue was moved or jostled. Theodore leaned against it during our meeting. He had a bad back, often needed support. The capsule ruptured. He inhaled the poison. He died within minutes. And you believe Mrs. Blackwell placed the capsule? She's the only person besides Theodore who knew the statue was hollow. She had access to it before delivery, and she had the motive. The mathematics are simple. Mathematics, Wolfe said, is simple. Human behavior rarely is. You're asking me to prove a conclusion you've already reached. That's not investigation, it's confirmation bias, masquerading as detection. I'm asking you to follow the evidence wherever it leads. If you conclude that Mrs. Blackwell is innocent, we'll accept that conclusion, but we need someone of your reputation to conduct the investigation. The police are too public, too messy. This matter requires discretion. And if I refuse? Dent reached into his jacket, slowly, carefully, aware of the Dobermans watching his every movement, and extracted a cashier's check. He placed it on Wolfe's desk with the reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. $100,000, Mr. Wolfe. $50,000 as your fee, $50,000 to cover expenses and any complications that may arise. In exchange, you investigate Theodore's death, identify the killer, and do so without involving the media or expanding the police investigation beyond its current scope. Wolfe looked at the check the way a man might look at a beautifully wrapped package that was ticking. Mr. Dent, I have 3 questions. First, why did Theodore Blackwell want to leave your society? Second, what were you hiding inside Mrs. Blackwell's statue before the poison capsule was added? Third, Which member of the Obsidian Society actually killed him? Dent's smile froze. For just a moment, less than a heartbeat, his composure cracked, and I saw something move behind his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or fear. "I don't know what you mean," he said slowly. "Of course you do. Mrs. Blackwell told us the statue was hollow, but she also told us that Theodore mentioned it was perfect for their needs." "Perfect for what, Mr. Dent? What were you storing inside a 7-foot obsidian sculpture that required such elaborate precautions?" "That's society business. And now it's murder evidence. The moment aconitine was introduced, your private business became public investigation. So I'll ask again, what was inside the statue?" Dent stood. The movement was smooth but tense, like a spring being released. "You're refusing the case." "I'm refusing to be manipulated. There's a difference. Mr. Wolfe, you're making a mistake. The Obsidian Society has existed for 83 years. We've survived the Depression, 2 world wars, and countless investigations precisely because we understand the value of discretion and the cost of exposure. If you refuse to help us, we will be forced to protect ourselves through other means." "Is that a threat?" "It's a statement of fact. We protect our members, Mr. Wolfe. All of them, including those who might be tempted to speak with private investigators." He glanced at me, "Or those who've already spoken." The temperature in the room dropped about 15 degrees. Caesar's ears came forward. Mars shifted his weight. Wolfe's voice became very soft. "Mr. Dent, you have now made 2 errors in judgment. First, you assumed I would exchange my integrity for money. Second, you have implied a threat against someone who has consulted me professionally. I don't respond well to either. The door is behind you. Use it." "You're protecting a murderer. I'm protecting the truth. If Mrs. Blackwell killed her husband, I'll prove it. If someone else did, I'll prove that instead. But I won't reach a conclusion before conducting an investigation, simply because it's convenient for your society's reputation. Then I'll make this simpler. The Obsidian Society will pay you $200,000 to stay out of this entirely. Don't investigate. Don't ask questions. Don't interfere. Just forget we exist." "No." "250. Mr. Goodwin, please escort Mr. Dent to the street." I stood. Dent looked at Wolfe for a long moment, his face unreadable, then turned and walked toward the hall. I followed, with Caesar and Mars flanking us. At the front door, Dent stopped and spoke without turning around. "Theodore used to say that the worst secrets aren't the ones people keep. They're the ones people think they've forgotten. You're going to wish you'd taken my offer, Mr. Wolfe." "I frequently wish many things, Mr. Dent, but I sleep well regardless." Dent left. His Bentley appeared within 30 seconds. Someone had been watching the house. The car swallowed him and glided away into traffic. I locked the door, checked the security system, and returned to the office. Wolfe was staring at the cashier's check with the expression of a man examining a dead fish. "Well," I said, "that was enlightening. It was alarming. Mr. Dent offered us $250,000 to do nothing. That suggests the truth is worth considerably more than that to keep hidden. Or they're just rich and panicked. Rich, certainly, but not panicked. Dent was too controlled, too precise. He came here with a script and escalated through predetermined offers. He expected me to refuse the first few before accepting. When I refused them all, he became dangerous. The threat about protecting their members. Not merely a threat, a warning. Someone in the society is at risk of exposure, possibly multiple people. Dent believes that person has already spoken to us. Mrs. Blackwell. Perhaps, or perhaps someone else we haven't met yet." Wolfe picked up the check and, with visible distaste, tore it in half. Then quarters, then eighths. The pieces fluttered into his wastebasket like expensive confetti. "Archie, call Saul Panzer. Tell him I need surveillance on 314 East 71st Street, beginning at 7 o'clock this evening. I want to know everyone who enters that building, how long they stay, and what condition they're in when they leave." "You think someone else is going to die tonight?" "I think the Obsidian Society is frightened, and frightened people make lethal decisions. If Theodore Blackwell was killed for wanting to leave, others may be at similar risk. We need to know who." The phone rang again. I picked it up, expecting more threats or offers. Instead, I got Inspector Kramer. "Goodwin, tell Wolfe he's got a problem. Someone just broke into the Blackwell building on East 71st, smashed one of those obsidian statues to pieces, found something inside it, looked like microfilm or documents already removed. The widow's being brought in for questioning. Thought he'd want to know. He hung up before I could respond. I looked at Wolfe. The statue's been destroyed. Whatever was inside it is gone, and the police think Mrs. Blackwell did it. Wolfe closed his eyes. Archie, cancel Saul's surveillance. Why? Because we're going to that meeting ourselves. Tonight, in person. I stared at him. You never leave the brownstone after dinner. Tonight, I'm making an exception. If the Obsidian Society wants my attention so desperately, they're about to get it. On my terms, not theirs. He opened his eyes, and I saw something in them I rarely saw. Anticipation. Call Fritz. Tell him we'll need dinner at 6. And Archie? Yeah? Bring the Dobermans. Fritz took the news about dinner at 6, with the stoic grace of a man who'd learned long ago that Nero Wolfe's schedule was more suggestion than commandment. He simply nodded, adjusted his mental calculations, and disappeared into the kitchen to perform whatever culinary magic would be required. I spent the afternoon making calls and doing legwork. Saul Panzer agreed to be on standby in case we needed backup. I contacted Lou Cohen at the Gazette and got background on the society members Mrs. Blackwell had named. Turns out that when you scratch the surface of Manhattan's elite, you find a lot of interesting scars. Silas Dent inherited banking fortune, tripled it through ventures nobody could quite explain, rumored to have files on half of Congress. Lyman Kerr, the journalist, won a Pulitzer for exposing municipal corruption, then somehow became untouchable by investigation himself. Dr. Helena Cross, society physician, treated wealthy patients who wanted their medical records to stay private. And Professor Malcolm Rice, taught at Columbia, published books on secret societies throughout history, and apparently practiced what he preached. At 4:30, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was a Western Union courier with a telegram. I signed for it and brought it to Wolfe, who was in the office pretending to read while actually brooding about leaving the house. He opened the telegram and read aloud. Mr. Wolfe, do not attend tonight's meeting. They will kill you. I am trying to help. Professor M. Rise. I whistled low. Well, that's not ominous at all. It's also potentially tactical. Professor Reese may be attempting to prevent my attendance through manufactured alarm, or he may be genuinely trying to keep you alive. That seems less likely, given that he's a member of the organization allegedly planning my murder. Wolfe set the telegram aside. However, the message suggests internal fractures within the society. Someone believes my investigation poses a sufficient threat to warrant assassination. That's useful information. It's also terrifying information. Fear is merely urgency wearing a mask, Archie. We proceed. At 5:15, there was a knock at the front door. Actual knocking this time, not the doorbell. The Dobermans went on alert but not aggressive. I checked the peephole and saw a man I didn't recognize. Late 50s, rumpled tweed jacket, grey beard that looked like it had been trimmed with garden shears, and the watery eyes of someone who'd had a complicated relationship with alcohol for several decades. Professor Malcolm Reese, presumably, having decided that telegrams weren't dramatic enough. I opened the door to the chain length. Professor Reese? Mr. Goodwin. He had an accent. Welsh, maybe, softened by years in America. I know I shouldn't be here. I'm violating about 6 different oaths just standing on your doorstep, but I needed to speak with Mr. Wolfe before tonight. May I come in? That depends. Are you here to threaten us, bribe us, or warn us? Warn you, and possibly beg. I'm not above begging if it saves lives. I looked back at Wolfe, who nodded. I undid the chain and let Reese enter. Caesar immediately positioned himself between the professor and the office door, not blocking, just observing. Reese noticed and gave the dog a respectful nod. Magnificent animals. I had a Doberman once, years ago. Smarter than most of my graduate students and better mannered than my colleagues. They don't like secrets, I said. Fair warning. Then they must find me appalling. I brought him to the office. Wolfe studied him with the intensity he usually reserved for problematic orchids or mediocre beer. Professor Reese, your telegram was succinct but concerning, elaborate. Reese sank into the red leather chair like a man who'd been walking for miles. Up close, he looked exhausted. The kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from carrying weight you can't put down. Mr. Wolfe, I've spent 30 years studying secret societies. The Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, the Bavarian Illuminati, all the organizations that people love to turn into conspiracy theories. And I've learned one fundamental truth. Societies survive by adapting or die by rigidity. The Obsidian Society is dying because it's become rigid, and it's about to take several people down with it, including Theodore Blackwell. Theodore was my friend, one of the few genuine ones I've had. He joined the society 15 years ago, same time as me. Back then it was almost innocent, wealthy men playing dress-up and pretending they ran the world, oaths and rituals and a lot of expensive brandy. But over the last 5 years, something changed. What changed? Wolfe asked. The leadership. Silas Dent became the de facto head. We don't use titles like president or master, but everyone knew he was in charge. And Dent had a vision. The society should stop pretending to have power and start actually wielding it. He wanted to create leverage. Blackmail, I said. Intelligence gathering, Reese corrected with academic precision. Though yes, effectively blackmail. Dent recruited people with access to information. Journalists, judges, corporate officers, physicians. Then he engineered situations where they'd become compromised. Once they had secrets to hide, they were locked in. And the hollow statue. Reese flinched. You know about that. Of course you do. Yes, the statue. Dent's masterpiece. He commissioned it specifically to hide a microfilm archive, every piece of leverage the society had accumulated over 5 years. Financial crimes, affairs, bribes, medical records, everything. He called it our insurance policy. If anyone tried to leave, if anyone threatened to expose us, we had enough evidence to destroy them utterly. Theodore wanted to leave, Wolfe said. Theodore wanted to burn it all down. He'd gotten sick of the games, sick of the manipulation. He'd seen what the society had become and wanted out. But Dent wouldn't allow it. No one leaves the society. That's the first oath we took. So Theodore made a plan. He'd steal the microfilm, expose the society's activities, and accept whatever legal consequences came with it. He believed confession was better than complicity. Noble, Wolfe observed. Also suicidal. Yes, I tried to talk him out of it. So did others. But Theodore was stubborn. He'd made up his mind. Reese's hands were shaking slightly. 4 days ago, at our weekly meeting, Theodore announced his intentions publicly, stood up during the ritual and said he was done, that he'd be taking the archive to the authorities within the week. The room went silent. Then Dent said, very calmly, that Theodore should reconsider, that we'd discuss it at the next gathering. Tuesday night, I said. Tuesday night. Theodore attended, though I begged him not to. He said he wanted to face them, to make them understand. During the meeting, he leaned against the statue. He always did that. His back troubled him. Within minutes, he couldn't breathe. He collapsed. Dr. Cross tried to save him, but aconitine works fast. He died while we stood there watching. The professor's voice had gone hollow, and everyone in that room knew it wasn't an accident. The poison was too specific, too calculated. Someone had put it there, knowing Theodore would be the one affected. Murder in front of 15 witnesses, and none of us could say a word without exposing ourselves. Wolfe leaned back in his chair. You're telling me this why? Because Dent is planning to kill you, Mr. Wolfe. Tonight, at the meeting, he's convinced that you're going to expose the society, just like Theodore tried to. He's arranged for an accident. I don't know the details, but I know it's coming. Please don't attend. Let the police handle this. Let someone else. The police can't enter without a warrant, which they can't obtain without probable cause, which they can't establish without witnesses, which they don't have because everyone present is complicit. Wolfe's voice was patient but implacable. No, Professor. If Theodore Blackwell's murder is to be solved, it will be solved by someone willing to enter the society's sanctum and face its members directly. Then you're going to die, Reese said flatly. Dent doesn't make empty threats. He's killed before, not personally, but through arrangement. Theodore isn't the first person to cross him, just the first one anyone might actually investigate. How many others? I asked. 2 that I know of. A journalist who was digging into society finances. Car accident. Very convenient. A federal prosecutor who was building a corruption case. Heart attack at 43. No prior health problems. Both within the last 18 months. both obstacles that needed removing. Wolfe was silent for a moment, his eyes closed, his mind working through permutations I couldn't begin to calculate. "Professor, why are you still a member?" "Because I'm a coward, Mr. Wolfe." Reese's voice was matter-of-fact, almost clinical. "I've spent my career studying secret societies from a safe academic distance. When I was invited to join a real one, I couldn't resist. It was like being a marine biologist who gets the chance to dive with sharks, thrilling and dangerous and stupid. By the time I realized what I'd joined, it was too late to leave without consequences. So I stayed. I participated. I compromised everything I claimed to believe in, one small step at a time. And now? Now I'm trying to save at least one life before this all collapses. Theodore tried to be a hero and died for it. You're trying to be a detective and you'll die for it. I'm trying to be, I don't know what, a witness maybe, someone who says this happened when it's all over." He stood up, steadying himself on the arm of the chair. "I've told you everything I know. If you still insist on attending tonight, then at least be prepared. The society meets at midnight, actual midnight, not 11:30 or 12:15. Dent is obsessive about timing. The building entrance is on 71st Street, but there's a service entrance on 72nd that's usually unguarded. The meeting room is in the basement, 3 levels down, and everyone wears masks, black silk, anonymous. You won't know who's who unless they speak." "The microfilm," Wolfe said. "Where is it now?" "That's the question, isn't it? Someone removed it from the statue before the police arrived. I assume Dent has it, but I can't be certain. It could be anywhere. It could be destroyed." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "One more thing. The Society has a procedure for dealing with threats. They call it the Obsidian Protocol, a unanimous vote to eliminate someone permanently. They've never used it in my time with them, but they're voting tonight, on you." "Flattering," Wolfe said dryly. "Terrifying," Reese corrected. "If the vote passes, you won't leave that building alive, and neither will anyone who helps you." He left, escorted by me and observed by 5 pairs of canine eyes. At the door, he paused one final time. "I hope you prove me wrong, Mr. Wolfe. I hope you're clever enough to survive this, because if you're not, Theodore died for nothing, and the society wins forever." Then he was gone, disappearing into the early evening darkness like a ghost seeking absolution. I returned to the office. Wolfe was pouring beer with the careful concentration of a man trying not to think too hard about mortality. "Well," I said, "that was cheerful. Professor Reese is a broken man, attempting redemption through confession. It's admirable, but not particularly helpful. Everything he told us, we could have deduced or discovered ourselves. Except the part about them voting to kill you tonight. Except that, yes, he drank deeply. Archie, I want you to know that attending this meeting is voluntary. You need not accompany me." "Are you kidding? I've been waiting for you to leave the brownstone for months. I'm not missing this." "You may be accompanying me to my execution. Then at least I'll have something interesting to write in my report. Wednesday, bought groceries. Thursday, watched Wolfe get murdered by secret society. Friday, probably also dead." Despite everything, Wolfe smiled. "Your loyalty is occasionally touching, Archie, even when expressed through flippancy." "I try." "Fritz has prepared an early dinner. We eat at 6, depart at 10:30. That gives us time to position ourselves before the society convenes." "And the Dobermans?" "Caesar, Mars and Apollo accompany us. Minerva and Diana remain here to guard the house. If we don't return by 3 a.m., Fritz has instructions to contact Saul Panzer and Inspector Kramer with everything we know." "That's morbid." "That's practical. Now, let me enjoy what may be my final beer in peace." He said it lightly, but I noticed he didn't actually drink much of that beer. He just held the glass and stared at it, as if the answer to the Obsidian Society's mysteries might be floating somewhere in the foam. Outside, the November dusk turned the city purple and grey. Somewhere across town, in an abandoned building that wasn't really abandoned, a secret society was preparing for a midnight meeting. They were sharpening knives, metaphorical ones, probably, though with these people who could tell. And in a few hours, Nero Wolfe and I were going to walk right into their carefully constructed trap. I should have been more worried. Instead, I was curious. Which, as any good detective could tell you, is usually where the trouble really begins. Fritz outdid himself with dinner. Rack of lamb with rosemary, roasted vegetables that somehow tasted like they'd been touched by divine inspiration, and a chocolate soufflé that made me temporarily forget we were potentially headed toward our deaths. Wolfe ate with his usual precise attention, but I noticed he kept glancing at the clock. At 10:15 we prepared. Wolfe changed into his most formal suit, a dark wool three-piece that made him look like a prosperous banker or a particularly well-fed funeral director. I wore my second-best suit and my most comfortable shoulder holster. The .38 rested against my ribs like an old friend offering questionable advice. The Dobermans knew something was happening. Caesar stood by the front door, absolutely still, his dark eyes tracking Wolfe's every movement. Mars positioned himself at my side, close enough that I could feel his warmth. Apollo paced near the windows, watching the street for threats that hadn't arrived yet. Minerva and Diana observed from the stairs, understanding they weren't coming but clearly unhappy about being left behind. "Archie," Wolfe said as he struggled into his overcoat, a garment roughly the size of a small tent. "The Dobermans are not to engage unless absolutely necessary. They're observers and deterrents, not soldiers." Caesar might disagree with that assessment. Caesar is intelligent enough to understand nuance. Mars, however, is more direct in his problem-solving approach. Keep him controlled. "I'll do my best, but if someone tries to poison you, I'm letting him do what comes naturally." "Fair enough." We took a taxi, one of the new checker cabs with enough room in the back for Wolfe, me and 3 Dobermans, who collectively weighed more than both of us combined. The driver gave us a look that suggested we were either gangsters or circus performers, decided he didn't care which, and drove north without comment. East 71st Street, between Madison and Park, was exactly the kind of neighborhood where millionaires kept secrets. Elegant townhouses, discreet lighting, the kind of quiet that money buys when it wants to be left alone. The building we wanted, 314, sat between 2 residential properties, like a gap in a wealthy smile. From the outside, it looked abandoned. Windows boarded up, facade showing calculated decay, a chain-link fence suggesting condemned property. But the fence was new, the boards were cosmetic, and I spotted at least 3 security cameras hidden in the architecture. The cab dropped us on Madison, and we walked the half-block to the service entrance on 72nd Street that Professor Reese had mentioned. It was 10:58. The society convened at midnight, which gave us an hour to position ourselves and figure out how to crash a secret meeting without getting immediately killed. The service entrance was a steel door set back from the street, painted to blend with the wall. No obvious lock, but I spotted a card reader hidden behind a loose brick. These people took their security seriously. Wolfe examined the door with the expression of a man facing an unexpected philosophy problem. "Archie, I don't suppose you brought lock-picking tools?" "I brought something better." I pulled out a business card, one of several I'd prepared based on Mrs. Blackwell's information. It had the Obsidian Society's symbol embossed in black ink. Nothing else, just the symbol. I'd had them made at a specialty printer in Chinatown, shown them the design from Mrs. Blackwell's envelope, and paid extra for same-day service. Whether they'd actually work on the card reader was pure speculation. I waved the card in front of the reader. Nothing. Tried again. Different angle. Still nothing. Perhaps knocking would be more. Wolfe began. The door clicked open. Caesar's ears came forward. Mars tensed. Apollo moved to point position, his body language saying, "I'll go first. Check for danger. Report back." I pushed the door open slowly. Beyond was a service corridor, dimly lit by emergency lighting, with concrete walls and the faint smell of cedar and old stone. The kind of corridor that had been designed to move supplies and staff without disturbing the wealthy patrons above. We entered. The Dobermans fanned out automatically. Caesar beside Wolfe, Mars with me, Apollo ranging ahead. The door locked behind us with a soft final click. "Well," I said quietly, "no turning back now." There was never any turning back, Archie. The moment Theodore Blackwell died, we became part of this story. We're simply catching up to the plot. We moved through the corridor, following signs that probably once directed delivery men toward kitchens and storage rooms. The building was larger than it looked from outside, a warren of passages and staircases descending into darkness. Professor Reese had mentioned 3 levels down. We found a service stairwell and started descending. The air grew colder as we went deeper. The emergency lighting gave way to something else, amber wall sconces that cast long shadows and made everything look like an old photograph. The walls changed from concrete to stone, then to something that looked like polished black marble. Obsidian, probably. These people were committed to their aesthetic. At the third level down, the stairwell opened onto a wider corridor, lined with that same black stone. The ceiling was vaulted, supported by pillars that caught the amber light, and reflected it back in strange patterns. The cedar smell was stronger here, mixed with something else, incense, maybe, or very expensive cologne. Apollo stopped, his body going rigid. Caesar and Mars immediately flanked us, forming a protective triangle. Someone was ahead. Voices, low and muffled, coming from behind a massive door at the end of the corridor. The door was carved from dark wood, maybe ebony, and inlaid with silver symbols I didn't recognize. Ancient symbols, probably, the kind that secret societies collect like baseball cards. I checked my watch. 11:37. "We're early," I whispered. "Want to wait until they're in full meeting mode?" "No. We announce ourselves now, before they're organized." Wolfe straightened his tie, adjusted his vest, and marched toward the door like a man approaching a restaurant reservation rather than a potential death sentence. I followed, hand near my 38, Dobermans in formation. Wolfe raised his massive fist and knocked on the door, 3 measured strikes that echoed through the corridor like gunshots. The voices inside stopped abruptly. Silence. Then footsteps. The door opened inward, revealing a man in a black suit and a black silk mask that covered the upper half of his face. Behind him, I could see a massive room lit by candles, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, and filled with figures in similar masks. "Who are you?" the doorman asked. His voice was cultured, neutral, designed to give nothing away. "Nero Wolfe, private investigator. I'm here about Theodore Blackwell's murder." The doorman didn't move. "This is a private club, members only." "Then consider me a concerned citizen with questions about a dead millionaire and a secret society that likes to play with poison. Are you going to invite me in, or do I go to the Times with what I already know?" The doorman's mask hid his expression, but his body language said he was calculating risks at high speed. Behind him, the candlelit figures were stirring, murmuring. Someone was approaching, a larger figure, moving with authority. Silas Dent appeared in the doorway, also masked, but unmistakable by his build and his bearing. "Mr. Wolfe, how unexpected, and how foolish. Foolish is killing a man and believing it won't have consequences. I'm here to discuss those consequences. With 3 attack dogs, they're Dobermans, not attack dogs. There's a distinction, though I admit the line can blur under certain circumstances." Dent stared at Wolfe for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he smiled. "You're either remarkably brave or remarkably stupid. Either way, I'm curious which. Come in. You can address the society directly. Let's see if your questions survive the answers." He stepped aside. Wolfe glanced at me, a look that said, "This is the point where you can still walk away." I shrugged, a gesture that said, "Not a chance." We entered the sanctum of the Obsidian Society, and immediately understood why they called it that. The room was circular, maybe 60 feet across, with walls of pure black obsidian polished to a mirror finish. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above us. The floor was white marble, inlaid with that same circular symbol from the letter. Radiating lines, geometric precision, ancient meaning. In the center of the room stood the broken statue, 7 feet of shattered black glass, its hollow interior exposed like a gutted corpse. Pieces lay scattered across the white marble, reflecting candlelight in jagged fragments. And around the room, arranged in a perfect circle, stood 15 figures in black robes and black masks, silent, watching, judging. We'd walked into a trial. The only question was whether we were the prosecutors or the accused. Caesar positioned himself directly behind Wolfe, his presence a statement of protection and power. Mars stayed with me, close enough that I could hear his breathing, steady, controlled, ready. Apollo circled slowly, analyzing the room with tactical precision, noting exits and threats. The masked figures didn't move. They just watched us with the kind of patient attention that predators give prey. Silas Dent closed the door. The sound echoed through the chamber, like a coffin lid slamming shut. He moved to join the circle, taking his place among the others, and suddenly Wolfe and I were standing in the center of that white marble floor, surrounded by obsidian walls that reflected our images in infinite regression. Nero Wolfe. Dent's voice came from behind the mask, amplified slightly by the chamber's acoustics. You have entered the sanctum of the Obsidian Society without invitation. You have brought animals into our sacred space. You have violated oaths that predate your birth by 7 decades. Explain yourself. Wolfe looked around the circle with the expression of a man evaluating a particularly disappointing restaurant. I'm here to identify Theodore Blackwell's murderer. Since you've been uncooperative with legal authorities, I've chosen to be uncooperative with your procedures. I find it's more efficient that way. A different voice spoke. Female, coming from the opposite side of the circle. Theodore Blackwell died from aconitine poisoning. His widow had motive, means, and opportunity. The case is simple. Dr. Cross, I presume? Wolfe said. Your diagnosis was impressively fast for a woman who allegedly tried to save him, almost as if you expected the symptoms. Silence. Then, I'm a physician. I recognize poison when I see it. You're also a member of this society, which means you knew the statue was hollow. You knew something was hidden inside it, and you knew Theodore wanted to expose you all. That's not diagnosis, doctor. That's conspiracy. Another voice, this one with that Welsh accent I recognized. Professor Rees. Mr. Wolfe, you're in danger. These people. Be silent, Malcolm. Dent's voice carried absolute authority. You've said quite enough already. You sent him to warn me off, Wolfe said. That was your first mistake. The warning convinced me that something here was worth investigating. My second mistake? Dent asked. Offering me $250,000 to stay away. Desperation has a price point, Mr. Dent. You showed me yours. I watched the circle carefully, noting who shifted weight when Wolfe spoke, who stayed still, who reacted. Professional habits die hard, even in secret society basements filled with theatrical lighting and homicidal rich people. A new voice joined the conversation, smooth, calculated, probably the journalist Lyman Kerr. Mr. Wolfe, you're operating on several false assumptions. First, that Theodore was murdered. He may have placed the poison himself, staging a suicide to appear as murder, specifically to damage the society. That's creative, Wolfe said. Also absurd. Theodore wanted to expose the society, not martyr himself for it. Suicide wouldn't serve his purpose, unless his purpose was revenge. Against whom? The society itself. That's circular logic masquerading as motive. Then perhaps, Dent said softly, the motive was simpler. Perhaps Theodore was murdered by someone outside the society, someone who gained access to the statue before it was delivered, someone who knew it would be hollow, someone who stood to inherit $15 million. Juliet Blackwell. Wolfe's voice was patient. Yes, I'm aware of your theory. It's tidy, convenient, and almost certainly wrong. Why? Because she didn't know the statue would be hollow when she created it. Theodore only told her afterward, which means someone else specified the hollow interior in the commission. Someone inside this room. A ripple of movement through the circle, subtle but there. Wolfe had scored a point. You commissioned the statue, Wolfe continued, looking directly at Dent. You gave Mrs. Blackwell specific dimensions and requirements. You wanted it hollow because you intended to hide something inside it. The microfilm archive Professor Rees mentioned. Your insurance policy against defection. Speculation, Dent said. Fact. Theodore told his wife the statue was perfect for your needs. Perfect for what, Mr. Dent? What were you storing inside 7 feet of obsidian? Society business. Murder evidence, Wolfe corrected, and now it's missing. Someone removed the microfilm between Theodore's death and the police's arrival. Someone who knew exactly what they were looking for and exactly where it was hidden. The widow was in her studio when the police arrived. I checked. She has an alibi, witnesses, and no access to this building after the statue was delivered. Try again. I was watching the circle carefully now, noting who stayed perfectly still and who shifted weight nervously. 3 figures on the far side were rigid with tension. 2 others near Dent were whispering to each other behind their masks. Mars pressed against my leg, his way of saying I smell fear, and it's everywhere. Mr. Wolfe, a new voice spoke up, older and cultured. You're suggesting that someone in this society killed Theodore and stole the archive? That would require planning, access, and a willingness to betray oaths sworn on blood and obsidian. Who among us would do such a thing? Someone who realized the archive made them vulnerable, Wolfe said. Someone who understood that possessing everyone's secrets meant everyone possessed yours. Someone intelligent enough to see that the insurance policy was actually a mutual destruction pact. He paused, letting his words settle into the chamber's silence. Someone who wanted out but couldn't leave while the archive existed. Theodore wanted out, someone said. Yes, and he was going to take the archive to the authorities, which would have exposed everyone equally. But what if someone else had a different plan? What if they wanted to destroy the archive, eliminate Theodore before he could talk, and leave the society vulnerable to dissolution through scandal? That person wouldn't be protecting the society. They'd be destroying it from within. The silence that followed was the kind that precedes violence. I put my hand on my .38 without drawing it. Mars shifted his weight forward. Caesar's ears came up. Apollo stopped circling and focused on the nearest exit. Then Silas Dent started clapping. Slow, measured applause that echoed through the obsidian chamber. Brilliant, Mr. Wolfe. Truly brilliant. You've constructed a perfect theory based on incomplete information and assumptions about people you've never met. It's impressive detective work. It's also completely wrong. Prove it, Wolfe said. I don't need to prove it. The society doesn't answer to you. We don't answer to anyone. That's rather the point of being a secret society. Dent stepped forward, breaking the circle. But since you've been so forthcoming with your theories, allow me to share some facts. Theodore Blackwell was my friend. We founded this society together, back when it was just 4 men with too much money and too much time. We built it into something significant, not through blackmail or manipulation, but through mutual protection and shared interests. That's a pleasant fiction, Wolfe said. It's the truth, or at least it was the truth for the first decade. Then things changed. People changed. Theodore changed. He became obsessed with exposure, with confession, with burning down everything we'd built, not because we were evil, Mr. Wolfe, but because he couldn't accept his own compromises anymore. So you killed him? No. I tried to save him. We all did. We offered him retirement with dignity, silence with compensation, exile with honor. He refused everything. He wanted martyrdom, and he was willing to destroy us all to achieve it. That still doesn't explain the poison. The poison explains itself. Dent reached up and removed his mask. His face was drawn, exhausted, the face of a man who'd stopped sleeping weeks ago. Theodore put it there himself. He wanted to die in a way that would force investigation, that would expose the society despite our best efforts. He committed suicide and framed us for murder, revenge from beyond the grave. Wolfe was silent for a moment, his eyes closed, his massive brain processing this new angle. I could see him testing the theory against the facts, looking for flaws, searching for cracks. No, he said finally, no, that's not quite right. Theodore may have wanted exposure, but he wouldn't sacrifice himself unnecessarily. He had other options: journalists, prosecutors, public confession. Suicide suggests desperation or coercion. Which was it, Mr. Dent? Neither. It was theatrical stupidity masquerading as heroism. You're lying. Wolfe opened his eyes. Not about everything. I believe Theodore wanted to expose the society. I believe you tried to dissuade him. But you're lying about the poison. Theodore didn't place it himself. Someone else did. Someone in this room. Prove it, Dent said, throwing Wolfe's challenge back at him. I intend to, but first I need the microfilm. It's gone. Destroyed. The widow took it when she broke into this building. The widow didn't break in, I said, speaking for the first time since entering the chamber. The police have her alibi. She was meeting with her attorney when someone smashed the statue. Try again. Dent's expression flickered, just for a second, but I saw it. Frustration, fear, the look of a man whose carefully constructed lies were developing cracks. Then someone else took it. One of our members, perhaps. A traitor within the society. He turned to address the circle. Which brings us to the vote. The Obsidian Protocol. Mr. Wolfe has accused us of murder, threatened our privacy, and brought animals into our sacred space. The penalty for such violations is permanent removal from the equation. All in favor. Hands rose around the circle. I counted them, 7, 8, 9. More than half the society voting to kill us. Mars growled. Low. Dangerous. The sound that meant I'm ready to hurt people if this goes badly. Apollo moved to the door, blocking escape but also blocking entry. Caesar stood absolutely still, his dark eyes fixed on Dent, waiting for Wolfe's command. The vote passes, Dent said. Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Goodwin, you have 1 minute to leave this building voluntarily. If you're still here when that minute expires, we will exercise our right to self-defense against intruders. Your deaths will be ruled accidental, a tragic mistake involving guard dogs and panicked victims. You're going to blame the Dobermans? I asked. Who would believe otherwise? 2 men broke into a private building with attack dogs. The dogs turned on them. Terrible tragedy. No further investigation required. Except for the 15 witnesses who just voted to kill us, I pointed out. Witnesses who will swear you attacked first, whose testimony will be believed. A private investigator with a grudge, or 15 respected members of New York society. Wolfe didn't move. He stood in the center of that white marble floor, surrounded by masked figures and reflected in infinite obsidian mirrors, and I saw something in his expression that I'd only seen a handful of times before. He was furious. What you kid knows you a Peter Templey pocket watch. Not angry. Wolfe got angry fairly often, but furious, the kind of cold rage that meant someone had pushed him past the boundaries of civilized tolerance. Mr. Dent, Wolfe said quietly, you have made several errors this evening, but your greatest error is assuming I came here unprepared. Archie, if you would. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small device, a voice recorder, about the size of a cigarette case, with a red LED blinking steadily. We've been recording since we entered the building, I said. Every threat, every admission, every vote to commit murder, it's all documented, and if we don't walk out of here safely, copies of this recording will be delivered to Inspector Kramer, the New York Times, and 3 different attorneys within the hour. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the candle flames seemed to stop flickering. Then Professor Rice started laughing, a broken, desperate sound that echoed through the obsidian chamber like something dying. Perfect, he said. Perfect. We killed Theodore to protect our secrets, and now we're going to be exposed anyway. Do you see the irony, Silas? We've become exactly what we were trying to prevent. Be silent, Malcolm, Dent said again, but his voice had lost its authority. Why? So we can dig ourselves deeper? So we can add 2 more murders to our list? Reese stepped forward, removing his mask. His face was haggard, tears streaming down his cheeks. No, I'm done. Theodore was right. Confession is better than complicity. He turned to Wolfe. I'll tell you everything. Who killed Theodore, where the microfilm is. All of it. But in exchange, I want immunity. I want protection. I want out. Malcolm, Dent's voice was dangerous now. I said I'm done, Reese shouted. Theodore died because we couldn't let him leave. How many more people have to die before this ends? How many more compromises before we're not even human anymore? Wolfe regarded him with something approaching sympathy. Professor, I can't promise immunity. That's for prosecutors to decide. But I can promise that the truth will be told, and told fairly. Is that acceptable? Yes. God, yes. Anything is better than this. Reese took a deep breath, steadying himself, then spoke directly to the circle of masked figures. Theodore was murdered by... The lights went out. Every candle, every sconce, every source of light in the chamber extinguished simultaneously, as if someone had thrown a master switch. We were plunged into absolute darkness, the kind of dark that makes you forget which way is up. Then, all hell broke loose. Section 8, the Obsidian Protocol. Darkness. Complete, suffocating, absolute darkness. The kind of dark where you lose all sense of space and direction, where your other senses scramble to compensate, and mostly just make you dizzy. I heard movement immediately. Footsteps, multiple people, coming from different directions, the scrape of something metal against stone, a woman's sharp intake of breath, the rustle of robes. Then Mars snarled. Not the warning rumble from earlier, this was the real thing, the sound that meant threat identified, engaging. I felt him lunge forward, heard the impact of body against body, heard someone cry out in pain and surprise. Archie, Wolfe's voice cut through the chaos, calm and commanding. "Stay exactly where you are. Don't move." "Little late for that advice," I said, dropping into a crouch and pulling the .38. In darkness this complete, shooting was as likely to hit a friend as an enemy, but the weight of the gun was reassuring anyway. More movement. Someone running. A door opening. I could hear the change in air pressure, feel a draft from somewhere to my left. Apollo barked, sharp, directional, the bark he used when tracking. Then I heard his claws on marble, moving fast, chasing something or someone toward that open door. Caesar's deeper voice cut through everything. A single authoritative bark that meant stop. Everyone. Now. It was the bark he used in the brownstone when Fritz and I were arguing, and Wolfe wanted silence. The kind of bark that came from absolute confidence in authority. Remarkably, people stopped moving. "Archie," Wolfe said again, his voice coming from maybe 6 feet to my right. "Do you still have the recording device?" I patted my pocket. "Still there." "Yeah." "Excellent. And your lighter?" "Also, yeah." "Please create light. Carefully." I pulled out my lighter and flicked it. The tiny flame seemed impossibly bright after the absolute darkness, casting weird shadows that danced across obsidian walls. The shadows multiplied in the mirrored surfaces, creating the illusion of 100 tiny flames. In that flickering light I could see Wolfe, still standing in the center of the floor, unmoved, unruffled, as if the lights going out was a minor social inconvenience. Caesar beside him, in the same protective position. Mars about 15 feet away, standing over a figure in black robes, one of the society members, on the ground, not moving but breathing heavily. Apollo at the door we'd entered through, blocking it, growling at something beyond. And the circle of society members, frozen in various positions of flight or fight, their masks still on, their bodies tense with adrenaline and fear. "Professor Reese," Wolfe called out. "Are you injured?" "No." His voice came from somewhere to my left, shaky but intact. "They tried to grab me, but your dog Mars is it, intercepted them." "Good boy," I said. Mars's tail twitched, his version of accepting a compliment while remaining professional. "Mr. Dent," Wolfe continued, "restore the lights, now, or Mr. Goodwin will use his weapon, and in this darkness, bullets are remarkably indiscriminate." A moment of silence. Then, "The master switch is by the door. Someone must have hit it during the confusion." "Apollo," Wolfe said, "release." The Doberman stepped aside from the door, still alert but allowing access. One of the masked figures moved cautiously toward the doorway, fumbled for something on the wall, and suddenly light flooded back into the chamber, bright, harsh, revealing. The candles remained unlit, but overhead fixtures I hadn't noticed before blazed to life, turning the obsidian chamber from atmospheric to surgical. And in that harsh light I could see everything clearly. The figure under Mars was Lyman Kerr, the journalist. His mask askew, his face bleeding from a split lip where Mars had made contact. Professor Reese stood alone near the shattered statue, his face pale, his hands shaking. Silas Dent was exactly where he'd been when the lights went out. Which was interesting. Most people move in darkness, even if just to brace themselves. He'd stayed absolutely still, as if he'd been expecting it. And most tellingly, Dr. Helena Cross was missing. I counted the figures. 14. There should have been 15. "Apollo," I said. "Where did she go?" The Doberman was still focused on the doorway, his body language saying the threat escaped. I tracked but couldn't catch. "Dr. Cross has fled," Wolfe observed. "How interesting, also how conclusive." "She killed Theodore," Professor Reese said, his voice gaining strength. "That's what I was about to say. Helena Cross murdered Theodore Blackwell." Dent spun on him. "That's impossible." "Helena tried to save him." "Helena killed him," Reese insisted, "and I can prove it. But first we need to find her before she destroys the evidence." "What evidence?" I asked. "The microfilm. She took it when she smashed the statue. She's had it this whole time, and if she gets out of this building, we'll never see it again." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Professor, how do you know Dr. Cross has the microfilm?" "Because I helped her steal it." Reese's voice was flat, confessional. "After Theodore died, Helena came to me. She said the archive contained evidence of medical malpractice, prescriptions she'd written for society members, treatments she'd provided off the books, things that would cost her license and possibly her freedom. She said if the archive went public, she'd be destroyed. She asked me to help her retrieve it before the police arrived. And you agreed? I agreed. We came back here that night, broke into the statue, removed the microfilm. She promised she'd just destroy the evidence about herself and return the rest to Dent. I believed her. But she didn't return it, Wolfe said. No, she kept all of it. And when I asked her why, she told me, insurance. Just like Dent had kept insurance on all of us, now she had insurance on him. Mutually assured destruction. Power through blackmail. And the murder. Wolfe's tone was patient but implacable. Reese took a shuddering breath. Theodore came to Helena 3 days before he died, told her he was going to expose the society, asked if she wanted to leave with him, start over with clean consciences. She said yes, said she'd help him, but instead she went to Dent and told him Theodore's plans. I never. Dent started. You never knew, Reese cut him off. Helena told you she'd handle it, that she'd talk Theodore down, convince him to stay quiet. And you believed her, because you trusted her. We all did. She was our physician, our confidant. We told her things we'd never tell anyone else. And she used those things, Wolfe said. She used everything. She knew Theodore leaned against the statue during meetings. Bad back, chronic pain, she'd been treating him for years. She knew exactly where to place the poison capsule for maximum effect. She knew the symptoms would mimic heart attack initially, giving her time to treat him before anyone realized it was poison. She knew we'd all be too shocked to question her actions in the moment. But why kill him? I asked. If she had the microfilm, she had leverage. She could have threatened him into silence. Because Theodore was a true believer, Reese said. He didn't care about leverage or threats. He wanted redemption through confession. Helena knew she couldn't control him, couldn't buy him, couldn't scare him, so she eliminated him and framed his widow, and let the rest of us believe it was Dent's doing, or Theodore's suicide, or some combination thereof. Wolfe turned to Dent. You suspected this. It wasn't a question. Dent's face confirmed it. The exhaustion, the fear, the desperate attempts to control the narrative. I suspected someone in the society had killed him, Dent admitted. But I didn't know who. I thought if I could contain the investigation, keep you out of it, we'd have time to determine the truth internally. Instead, you forced the confrontation. And now Dr. Cross has fled with evidence of multiple federal crimes. Wolfe looked at the circle of masked figures, his expression contemptuous. The Obsidian Society. 83 years of secrets, power, and mutual protection. Undone by basic human greed and stupidity. It's almost poetic. She can't have gone far, I said. Apollo was tracking her. She's still in the building. Then we find her, Wolfe said. Archie, you and Mars search the upper levels. Professor Reese will guide you. He knows this building. I'll remain here with Caesar and ensure our other society members don't develop inconvenient amnesia about tonight's events. What about me? Dent asked. You, Mr. Dent, will sit quietly and consider the consequences of building empires on blackmail. When the police arrive, you'll provide a full statement about the society's activities, its membership, and Dr. Cross's actions. In exchange, I may suggest to Inspector Kramer that you've been cooperative. May suggest? I'm not in the business of guarantees, Mr. Dent, especially not with people who voted to kill me 20 minutes ago. I moved toward the door, Mars beside me, when Wolfe called out one more time. Archie? Dr. Cross is armed, desperate, and has killed once already. Don't be heroic. Would I do that? Frequently, hence the warning. Professor Reese joined us, and together we climbed the stairs up from the obsidian chamber, through the amber-lit corridors, toward the upper levels where Dr. Helena Cross was presumably destroying evidence and planning her escape. Mars led the way, his nose working, tracking a scent I couldn't detect but trusted completely. Behind us, I could hear Apollo's claws on stone. He'd left his guard post to join the hunt. We reached the ground floor. Mars paused at a branching corridor, sniffed both directions, then moved decisively left. Apollo confirmed with a soft woof, yes, that way she went that way. The corridor led to what must have once been the museum's administrative offices, a warren of small rooms filled with abandoned desks, filing cabinets, and the detritus of institutional failure. One door at the end stood ajar, light spilling from inside. I pulled the 38, and moved forward, Mars and Apollo flanking me. Professor Reese stayed back, smart enough to avoid the dangerous part. "Dr. Cross," I called out, "it's over. The Society knows you killed Theodore. The police are on their way. You can come out voluntarily, or Mars can encourage you. Your choice." Silence. Then a woman's voice, cultured and cold. "I don't think so, Mr. Goodwin. I have a decade of the most powerful people in New York documented on microfilm. If I go public, I'll destroy 50 lives. That's leverage enough to negotiate." Negotiate what? A lighter cell in federal prison. Negotiate immunity, safe passage, a new life somewhere warm. She appeared in the doorway, and I got my first clear look at Dr. Helena Cross, 50s, elegant in an expensive way, with the kind of face that inspired confidence in patients and concealed calculation underneath. She was holding a small metal box, the kind used for storing film reels. I didn't want to kill Theodore. He forced my hand. By wanting to leave, by wanting to destroy us all, the Society provides protection, connections, power. Theodore wanted to throw that away for some abstract moral purity. It was selfishness disguised as nobility. And your solution was poison. My solution was pragmatic. Theodore was going to hurt hundreds of people with his confession. Society members, their families, their business partners. I prevented that damage. One death versus hundreds of destroyed lives. The mathematics were simple. "Mathematics," I said, echoing Wolfe's earlier comment. "People keep talking about mathematics tonight, but murder isn't math, Doctor. It's just murder," says the man who makes his living from other people's crimes. She stepped fully into the corridor, the metal box clutched against her chest. "I'm leaving now. If you try to stop me, I'll destroy this film, and all those secrets die with me. The Society protects itself, Mr. Goodwin. That includes protecting its members from prosecution." Mars growled, low, serious. Apollo moved to cut off her retreat. She looked at them and smiled without humor. "You won't shoot me. Not with your employer's reputation at stake. And your dogs won't attack without command. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to walk past you, leave through the service entrance, and disappear. And you're going to let me, because the alternative is messier for everyone." She started walking. I had maybe 3 seconds to make a decision. Shoot her? Let her go? Command the Dobermans? Then Professor Reese made the decision for me. He lunged forward, grabbed the metal box, and yanked it from Dr. Cross's hands. She fought back, strong, trained, desperate, but Reese held on with the fervor of a man seeking redemption through action. The box fell, hit the floor, popped open, and inside, nothing. No microfilm, no reels, just empty space. Dr. Cross started laughing, a brittle breaking sound. "Did you really think I'd carry the original? I'm a physician, Mr. Goodwin. I understand backup plans. I understand redundancy. The real archive is somewhere safe. This was just a prop." "Where?" Reese demanded. "Somewhere you'll never find it. Somewhere I can access remotely if I need to. Insurance, Professor, just like you taught me." I looked at Mars. He was still growling, still focused on Dr. Cross, still waiting for a command. "Mars," I said quietly, "hold her." The Doberman moved with beautiful precision, not attacking, not biting, just positioning himself directly in front of Dr. Cross and radiating the kind of menace that makes people reconsider their life choices. Apollo joined him, completing the blockade. Dr. Cross stopped laughing, stopped moving, just stood there, trapped between 2 Dobermans and her own collapsing lies. "Archie Goodwin," Wolfe's voice boomed up the stairwell. "Inspector Kramer has arrived. Bring everyone downstairs immediately." Perfect timing, as usual. I gestured to Dr. Cross. "After you, Doctor. Time to face the mathematics of your choices." We descended back into the obsidian chamber, back into that harsh light and that circle of mirrors reflecting our sins, and found Inspector Kramer standing beside Nero Wolfe, looking like a man who'd just walked into the world's strangest crime scene. "Goodwin," Kramer said, chewing his unlit cigar with aggressive skepticism, "you want to explain why I got an anonymous call telling me to bring a warrant and every available officer to an abandoned building on East 71st Street? Anonymous call." I looked at Wolfe. He smiled barely, but genuinely. "I may have asked Fritz to contact the inspector, should we not return by a certain hour. He was slightly early. but I'm not complaining. So you're telling me, Kramer continued, looking around at the obsidian chamber, the masked figures, the shattered statue, and the 3 Dobermans arranged in tactical formation, that this is all related to Theodore Blackwell's murder? Directly related, Wolfe confirmed. Dr. Helena Cross killed Mr. Blackwell with aconitine poison. Professor Malcolm Rees will provide testimony. The remaining society members will provide context, and I will provide a complete explanation once we're somewhere that doesn't feel like a Bond villain's therapy session. Kramer looked at Dr. Cross, who had gone very still and very pale. Doctor, anything to say? I want my attorney. Course you do. Everyone wants their attorney until they realize their attorney can't help them. He gestured to the uniformed officers behind him. Take her downtown. Careful, apparently she's dangerous. As the officers led Dr. Cross away, she looked back at Wolfe one final time. The microfilm is still out there, Mr. Wolfe. All those secrets, you haven't won anything. I've won justice for Theodore Blackwell, Wolfe said quietly. The secrets can tend to themselves. Blackmail has a way of losing power once exposed to daylight. She laughed again, that same brittle sound, and then she was gone, escorted up the stairs and out of the society's sanctum forever. Kramer turned to the remaining masked figures. All right, everyone take off those ridiculous masks and prepare to give statements. This is going to be a very long night for all of you. The masks came off. Faces emerged. Wealthy, powerful, frightened faces that belonged to people who'd built their lives on secrets and were now watching those lives collapse in real time. Silas Dent was the last to remove his mask. He looked at Wolfe with something approaching respect. You destroyed us. No, Mr. Dent, you destroyed yourselves. I simply documented the process. We left them there, 15 wealthy criminals preparing to explain to Manhattan Homicide why they'd been playing dress-up in an abandoned building while one of their members committed murder. Outside, the November night was cold and clean. The fog had lifted. The city looked almost innocent in the moonlight. Caesar, Mars, and Apollo walked beside us. Their job done, their postures relaxed. Just 3 Dobermans out for a midnight stroll with their humans. Archie, Wolfe said as we found a taxi, remind me never to leave the brownstone again. You say that every time. And every time I mean it. Also, call ahead to Fritz. Tell him we're safe, we're tired, and we require an unconscionable amount of food immediately upon arrival. Done. The taxi carried us south through empty streets, back toward West 35th Street and Sanity. Behind us, the Obsidian Society was being dismantled by bureaucracy and law, a slower death than they'd planned for Theodore Blackwell, but just as final. In the back seat, Mars rested his head on my knee. Caesar sat beside Wolfe, dignified and calm. Apollo watched the city slide past the windows, alert for threats that weren't coming. Did she really hide the microfilm somewhere safe? I asked after a while. Almost certainly, Wolfe said. But without the society's power structure to sustain it, the archive is just information, scandalous perhaps, but not actionable. The blackmail only worked because the society was unified. Now they'll spend the next decade destroying each other in court. The secrets will emerge naturally, through legal process rather than extortion. So we didn't actually recover the evidence. We recovered something more valuable, the truth about Theodore Blackwell's death. The rest will resolve itself through entropy and human nature. He settled deeper into his seat. Sometimes, Archie, the best solution to a conspiracy is simply to break the conspirators' ability to coordinate. Chaos is more effective than justice. That's cynical. That's realistic. We rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, 3 humans and 3 Dobermans who'd survived a secret society's attempt at murder and come out more or less intact. When we got back to the brownstone, Fritz was waiting with roast beef sandwiches, beer, and the kind of quiet understanding that made him invaluable. Wolfe ate 3 sandwiches. I ate 2. The Dobermans got bones that Fritz had been saving for special occasions. At 3 a.m., finally, I went upstairs to bed. Mars followed me, settled on the floor beside my bed, and immediately started snoring. I lay there thinking about obsidian mirrors and hollow statues, and secret societies that thought they could control truth through blackmail. Eventually, I slept. And in my dreams, Caesar was guarding Wolfe's door, Minerva and Diana were patrolling the halls, and Apollo was watching the windows for threats that would never come. Because the brownstone was safe. And we were home. Section 9. The aftermath. The newspapers had a field day. The Times ran it front page with the headline, "Secret Society Exposed in Murder Case." The Daily News went with, "Obsidian Society Scandal, 15 Bigwigs Busted." The Herald Tribune ironically buried the story on page 6, probably because their own Lyman Kerr was one of the 15 facing investigation. Inspector Kramer spent 3 days interrogating society members and came away with enough charges to keep prosecutors busy for years: conspiracy, obstruction of justice, blackmail, extortion, and 1 count of first-degree murder for Dr. Helena Cross. She pleaded not guilty. Her attorney claimed Theodore Blackwell's death was accidental, that the poison had been placed by person or persons unknown, possibly by Theodore himself as a suicide, staged to look like murder. It was creative. It was also doomed. Professor Rees testified. The other society members, faced with their own legal troubles, corroborated his account. The evidence was circumstantial but overwhelming. Dr. Cross had motive. The medical malpractice evidence in the archive, means, access to aconitine through her practice, and opportunity. She'd been alone with the statue during one of the society's set-up meetings. The district attorney offered her a deal, 20 years in exchange for the microfilm archive. She refused, said she'd destroyed it, said it never existed, said Theodore had been delusional about the whole thing. Nobody believed her, but without the physical evidence, the DA couldn't prove the blackmail scheme beyond Theodore's death. They settled for prosecuting the murder and letting the other charges fall away through lack of evidence. Justice, as Wolfe had predicted, would be incomplete but sufficient. Juliet Blackwell inherited everything: the 15 million, the brownstone in Soho, Theodore's art collection. She called the office 3 days after Dr. Cross's arrest to thank Wolfe personally. I took the call in the office while Wolfe was upstairs with his orchids. "Mr. Goodwin, I wanted to tell Mr. Wolfe that I'm grateful, not just for finding Theodore's killer, but for believing me when no one else would." "Mrs. Blackwell, Wolfe didn't believe you. He just investigated whether you were lying. There's a difference. Still, he gave me the truth. That matters more than belief. What will you do now?" "Work, create, try to remember Theodore before the society corrupted him." A pause. "I'm making a new sculpture, 7 feet tall, clear glass instead of obsidian. I'm calling it Transparency." Theodore would have appreciated the irony. "I'm sure he would have. And Mr. Goodwin, tell Mr. Wolfe that his fee is waiting whenever he wants to collect it. I know he refused Dent's money, but mine comes without strings, just gratitude and respect." "I'll tell him." She hung up. I went to inform Wolfe about the fee, knowing he'd probably refuse it on principle. He had a complicated relationship with money that mostly involved finding reasons not to accept it. But when I explained Mrs. Blackwell's offer, he surprised me. "Accept it, Archie. Mrs. Blackwell has lost her husband and gained a fortune she never wanted. The least we can do is allow her the dignity of paying for services rendered." "That's unusually pragmatic of you." "I'm occasionally pragmatic when it suits my principles. Also, we'll need the money to repair the gouges Mars left in the office floor. Hardwood doesn't grow on trees, despite what the name implies. Hardwood literally grows on trees." "Don't be pedantic, Archie. It's unbecoming." Silas Dent disappeared before the prosecutors could file formal charges. His lawyers claimed he'd left the country for health reasons, but nobody with functioning brain cells believed that. He'd simply deployed the wealth and connections he'd spent decades accumulating and vanished into whatever comfortable exile rich men vanish into when their crimes catch up with them. The other society members faced various consequences. Lyman Kerr lost his job at the Tribune. Professor Rees was placed on administrative leave from Columbia. 3 of the businessmen resigned from their companies under pressure. The judge and the deputy mayor managed to keep their positions through lawyering and political maneuvering, but their careers were effectively over. The Obsidian building on East 71st Street was sold at auction. A developer bought it and announced plans to turn it into luxury condominiums, which seemed appropriately ironic. Secret society headquarters becoming overpriced apartments for Manhattan's new elite. The hollow statue, or what remained of it, was claimed by the police as evidence and eventually donated to a museum that specialized in contemporary crime artifacts. Juliet Blackwell attended the opening ceremony and gave a speech about the burden of knowledge and the weight of secrets. The critics loved it. said she'd transformed personal tragedy into artistic statement. She just looked tired. As for the microfilm archive, the insurance policy that had started everything, it never turned up. Dr. Cross maintained she'd destroyed it, but I suspected she'd hidden it somewhere as a final act of leverage, maybe in a safety deposit box under a false name. Maybe with an attorney who'd release it if she died suspiciously. Maybe nowhere at all. Wolfe was right. Without the society to coordinate it, the blackmail material was just information. Interesting, scandalous, potentially embarrassing, but not powerful. The individual society members had bigger problems than old secrets. They were facing current charges, actual prosecutors, real consequences. The archive became a ghost story, urban legend, something people whispered about at Manhattan cocktail parties, but nobody could prove existed. 3 weeks after Theodore Blackwell's murder was solved, life returned to normal at the brownstone. Wolfe resumed his schedule, plant rooms from 9 to 11 and 4 to 6, office work in between, meals prepared by Fritz with religious precision, beer consumed with philosophical satisfaction. I resumed my duties, answering correspondence, managing clients, needling Wolfe when he got too comfortable, and making sure the Dobermans got enough exercise and not too much table food. The Dobermans resumed their positions, Caesar at Wolfe's bedroom door, Mars at mine, Apollo patrolling the ground floor, Minerva and Diana alternating shifts watching the street. They'd tasted adventure and handled it professionally. Now they were content to return to routine, just like the rest of us. It was a cold December afternoon when Inspector Kramer showed up unannounced, looking less angry than usual and carrying a manila envelope. "Wolfe in?" he asked when I opened the door. "Upstairs with the plants. You can wait in the office or come back in 40 minutes. "I'll wait. I've got something he'll want to see." I brought him to the office and offered coffee, which he accepted. We sat in silence for a few minutes, Kramer chewing his cigar and me reviewing the day's mail. Finally, Kramer spoke. "Your boss did good work on the Blackwell case. I'm not saying I liked his methods. Breaking into crime scenes, intimidating witnesses, generally making my job harder. But he got results. Dr. Cross is going away for 20 years minimum. The society's been exposed. Justice was served. I'll let him know you're pleased." I didn't say pleased. I said justice was served. There's a difference. He pulled a folder from the manila envelope and set it on my desk. "This is off the record, unofficial. Probably illegal for me to share it with you, but I figure Wolfe earned the right to know." I opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of documents, police reports, witness statements, financial records, all related to the Obsidian Society investigation. "What am I looking at?" I asked. Page 4. The forensics report on the statue. I flipped to page 4 and read again, then looked up at Kramer with what must have been a confused expression. "Yeah," he said, "that's the thing. According to the forensics report, the hollow cavity in the statue showed no signs of ever containing microfilm, no residue, no scratches from metal canisters, no evidence that anything had been stored there at all. The statue had been hollow, but it had been empty. So the archive never existed," Kramer finished, "or at least it was never in that statue. Dent and Cross and the rest of them built their whole blackmail empire on an insurance policy that was never actually implemented. They collected all that information, compiled all those secrets, and then never stored them anywhere useful. But Dr. Cross killed Theodore to protect nothing. She killed him because she thought the evidence was there, because Dent had convinced everyone the archive existed and was safely hidden. It was a bluff that became a shared delusion, and Theodore died because he believed the lie just like everyone else." I sat back in my chair trying to process this. So the whole thing, the society, the murder, the conspiracy, was based on information that didn't actually exist. Based on the fear of information that might have existed, which turns out to be just as powerful as the real thing. Kramer stood up, retrieving his folder. "Don't tell Wolfe I showed you this. Don't tell anyone. The official line is that the archive was destroyed. Let people believe that. Let the society members spend the next decade wondering if their secrets are going to surface. Fear is a better punishment than jail time anyway." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Wolfe solved a murder based on a lie, and I thought he should know. Professional courtesy, maybe. Or maybe I just wanted someone else to appreciate the irony." He moved toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. Professor Reese? He didn't help Dr. Cross steal the microfilm from the statue. He couldn't have. There was nothing to steal. Everything he told you in that obsidian chamber was a performance, his own attempt to look less guilty by confessing to crimes he didn't commit. Why? Because he's a coward who studies secret societies instead of having the guts to actually run one. He wanted to be the whistleblower, the hero, the guy who brings everything down, but really, he was just another scared rich guy trying to avoid consequences. And now he's teaching at a community college in New Jersey and writing a book about his experiences in the society. He'll make more money from the book than he ever made from the blackmail. American Justice, Goodwin. Isn't it beautiful? Kramer left. The door closed. The brownstone settled into afternoon silence. I sat there holding the folder, thinking about obsidian statues and hollow spaces and blackmail archives that never existed except in the imagination of frightened men. When Wolfe came down from the plant rooms at 6, I was still sitting there. Archie, you look contemplative. It's unsettling. Kramer was here. He brought information about the Blackwell case. And the microfilm archive never existed. The statue was hollow but empty. Dr. Cross killed Theodore to protect evidence that wasn't there. Wolfe lowered himself into his chair with a grunt. Fascinating. Also inevitable. You knew. I suspected. The entire case had the feeling of a conspiracy built on assumptions rather than facts. Secret societies thrive on mystique, Archie. The appearance of power is often more effective than actual power. Dent convinced his members they had leverage, and that belief made them behave as if it were true. So Theodore died for nothing. Theodore died because people believed something dangerous, which is the same reason most people die violent deaths. The truth of the belief is irrelevant. Only the conviction matters. He reached for the beer opener, a ritual that meant the day's work was done and philosophical speculation could begin. Does it bother you, I asked, that we solved a murder that happened because of a lie? All murders happen because of lies, Archie. Lies we tell ourselves, lies we tell others, lies that become so embedded we forget they're not truth. Dr. Cross believed she was protecting herself from exposure. Theodore believed he was fighting corruption. Dent believed he was maintaining order. All lies, all sincerely held, all lethal in their consequences. And the society? The society will dissolve. Its members will face justice of various kinds, and in 10 years another group of wealthy men will form another secret organization because humans are incapable of learning from history. He poured beer with the precision of a chemist. Our job was to identify Theodore Blackwell's killer. We did that. The philosophical implications of why people kill over empty symbols is someone else's problem. Whose problem? Theologians, possibly, or poets, or anyone foolish enough to believe that understanding human nature will somehow improve it. Fritz appeared in the doorway. Dinner is ready. Duck with cherry sauce, wild rice, and asparagus. Excellent. Archie, we eat. Then we forget about the Obsidian Society and its theatrical nonsense. Tomorrow brings new problems, and I prefer to face them well-fed and adequately rested. We ate dinner. Fritz had outdone himself. The duck was perfect, the sauce was divine, and the asparagus didn't taste like sadness for once. After dinner, I took the Dobermans for their evening walk. The December air was crisp and clean, the city lights reflected off low clouds, and the dogs moved beside me with the casual confidence of animals who'd faced actual danger and found it manageable. Back at the brownstone, I found Wolfe in the office with a book about Balkan history and a second beer. Caesar was at his feet, dozing. The scene was so normal, so perfectly routine, that the events at the Obsidian Society felt like they'd happened in a different life. Archie, Wolfe said without looking up from his book, we're not accepting any new cases until after New Year's. I require time to recover from leaving the house. It's been 3 weeks. The trauma lingers. Also, Fritz is planning something elaborate for Christmas dinner, and I wish to enjoy it without the interruption of murder, conspiracy, or clients who believe their problems are more important than roast goose. Fair enough. One more thing. The Dobermans performed admirably during our adventure. They deserve recognition. What kind of recognition? Fritz is preparing special cuts of beef. Prime rib, aged properly, cooked to perfection. We celebrate our survival by sharing it with those who ensured that survival. You're going soft. I'm being pragmatic. If we ever have to leave the house again, God forbid, I want those dogs to remember that loyalty has benefits. And the real reason is that Caesar saved my life by staying calm when everyone else was panicking, and I'm not so proud that I can't acknowledge my debts. He turned a page in his book. Now leave me in peace. I'm reading about Montenegro's resistance to the Ottoman Empire, and it's making me feel better about refusing to join organizations. I left him there, went upstairs, and wrote up the final report on the Blackwell case. All the facts, all the details, everything except what Kramer had told me about the empty statue. That could stay unofficial, secret, another lie in a case built on lies. But this one at least was harmless. Outside my window, Manhattan hummed with its usual chaos. Millions of people keeping millions of secrets, most of them meaningless, all of them convinced of their own importance. And in a brownstone on West 35th Street, 1/7 of a ton of detectives sat reading about historical resistance movements, drinking beer, and pretending the world outside didn't exist, which was exactly how it should be. Epilogue. The letter in the mail. 3 months later, on a grey March morning when winter refused to admit spring was coming, I brought the mail to Wolfe's desk during his office hours. Standard stuff, bills, correspondence, a seed catalogue from an orchid breeder in Hawaii, and one envelope that made me pause. Cream-coloured paper, expensive, hand-addressed to Mr. Nero Wolfe in elegant script. No return address, but sealed with black wax bearing a familiar symbol, a circle with radiating lines, geometric and ancient-looking. I held it up. We've got a visitor from the past. Wolfe looked at the envelope and frowned. The Obsidian Society is defunct. Dent is in exile, Dr. Cross is in prison, and the others are facing various legal consequences. Who would send such a thing? Only one way to find out. He took the envelope, broke the seal, and extracted a single sheet of paper. He read it once, then set it down with a sigh that could have launched ships. Well? I asked. No. It's from Professor Reese. He's writing to inform me that he's formed a new organization, the Obsidian Society, dedicated to enlightened discourse and mutual advancement among academics and professionals. He's inviting me to become a founding member. I started laughing. Couldn't help it. Some people never learn, I said. Most people never learn, Archie. That's why we stay employed. He picked up the letter and carried it to the fireplace, where a small fire was burning against the March chill. The expensive paper caught immediately, curling into ash. Are you going to reply? I asked. I just did. The letter burned completely, leaving only the faint scent of smoke and expensive stationery. Wolfe returned to his desk and picked up the seed catalogue. Archie, remind me to never join anything that requires oaths, passwords, or matching outfits. Individuality is exhausting enough without adding ceremony to it. Done. Also, if Professor Reese contacts us again, inform him that I'm deceased. You've moved to Argentina, and the Dobermans have learned to answer the phone and refuse all solicitations. That's going to be hard to prove. Then make it convincing. You're good at lying when necessary. I prefer to think of it as creative truth management. That's what I said, lying. The phone rang. I answered, Nero Wolfe's office. A woman's voice, nervous and rushed. Is this Mr. Wolfe? I need help. My husband has been murdered, and the police think I did it. But I swear I'm innocent. They found evidence that can't be explained, and I covered the mouthpiece and looked at Wolfe. Another case. Murder, frame job, desperate widow. Sound familiar? All cases sound familiar. They're all variations on the same theme. Someone died. Someone lied. Someone wants the truth. He gestured with one massive hand. Take the details. If it interests me, we'll consider it. If not, recommend another investigator. I uncovered the phone. Ma'am, tell me everything from the beginning, and don't leave anything out. Mr. Wolfe hates being surprised. She started talking. I started writing. Wolfe went back to his orchid catalogue, occasionally glancing up to gauge my expression and determine whether this case was worth his time. Outside, the city continued its chaotic dance. Secrets were kept and exposed in equal measure. People died over lies, and people lived through worse. And in the brownstone on West 35th Street, justice was served in measured doses, carefully investigated, thoroughly considered, and properly compensated. The Dobermans kept watch. Fritz kept cooking, I kept working, and Nero Wolfe kept solving murders, one impossibility at a time. Because that's what we did. That's what we'd always done. And despite secret societies, hollow statues, and blackmail archives that never existed, that's what we'd keep doing until the cases stopped coming or the beer ran out. Whichever came first. The truth is rarely pure and never simple, but it's usually findable if you know where to look. Nero Wolfe,